When a billionaire CEO kissed his mistress in front of 300 witnesses, the cameras turned to his wife expecting tears. Instead, Clara Hale smiled. Because while the world believed Adrien Cole built a real estate empire worth billions, she knew a secret that would destroy him. He didn't own a single brick. She did. And tonight, his public betrayal had just triggered a clause in his contract that would strip him of everything. The king was about to fall, and the queen he'd underestimated was about to reclaim her throne. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and comment which city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale travels. The crystal ballroom of the Belmont Grand Hotel glittered like a jewel box under the chandeliers, every surface reflecting light, wealth, and ambition. Charleston's most powerful players filled the room. Developers, politicians, tech moguls, old money families whose names graced museum wings. They'd come dressed in their finest champagne flutes in hand to celebrate the 15th anniversary of Cole Enterprises, the real estate empire that had transformed the city's skyline. At the center of it all stood Adrien Cole. He commanded the stage like he commanded every room he entered. Tall, silver-haired at 48, wearing a custom Italian suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. His smile was practiced perfection, the kind that had closed billion-dollar deals and charmed investors who should have known better. 15 years ago, Adrien said into the microphone, his voice carrying that smooth confidence that made people want to believe him, I stood in an empty lot with nothing but a dream and determination. They said I was crazy. They said a kid from nowhere couldn't compete with Charleston's old guard. Appreciative laughter rippled through the crowd. They loved this story. The self-made man, the underdog who'd conquered the establishment. Clara Hale stood off to the side of the stage, positioned exactly where she'd been positioned for 12 years of these events, visible enough to seem supportive, distant enough to remain decorative. She wore a midnight blue gown that hugged her slender frame, her dark hair swept up in an elegant twist. At 42, she still turned heads, though most people looked through her rather than at her. The invisible wife, the perfect accessory. If they only knew. But I didn't listen to the doubters, Adrien continued, warming to his performance. I built Cole Enterprises one property at a time, one deal at a time, until we became what you see today, the largest private development firm in the Southeast. More applause. Claire's face remained serene, but her mind cataloged every lie in that speech. He hadn't built anything. He'd been 26 and broke when they met, working as a junior analyst at a firm her father's company had invested in. Charming, yes. Ambitious, absolutely. But everything he'd touched since had been funded by the Hale family's private holding company. Not that anyone knew that. And I couldn't have done it without the support of my beautiful wife, Clara, Adrien said, gesturing toward her with practiced magnanimity. The spotlight swung to her. Clara smiled the smile she'd perfected over years of these performances. Warm but not too bright, supportive but not attention-seeking. She gave a small wave. The crowd applauded politely before their attention returned to Adrien, exactly as it always did. Exactly as she'd let it, for reasons they would understand soon enough. Clara's gaze drifted across the ballroom, reading the room the way she'd learned to read balance sheets and market trends. Mayor Richardson stood near the bar, already working on his third bourbon. The Ashford twins, real estate attorneys who handled half the commercial deals in the city, held court near the silent auction tables. And there, never far from Adrien's orbit, was Vanessa Drake, Adrien's vice president, his protege, his mistake. Vanessa stood near the stage steps, sleek and sharp in a red dress that was calculated to draw eyes. She was 34, brilliant with numbers, ruthless in negotiations, and absolutely convinced she'd outplayed everyone in the room. For the past 8 months, she'd been sleeping with Adrien, believing she was climbing to the top of an empire. Poor thing had no idea the empire had a different owner. Clara watched Vanessa watch Adrien, saw the possessive gleam in her eyes, the slight curl of satisfaction at her lips. She was waiting for something, planning something. Clara had known about the affair within 2 weeks of its starting. Her assistant, Marcus Chen, had brought her the evidence. Texts, hotel receipts, a paper trail that Adrien hadn't even bothered to hide particularly well. Men like Adrien never thought they'd get caught because they couldn't imagine their wives were paying attention. "Should we prepare a response?" Marcus had asked, his expression carefully neutral behind his glasses. At 29, Marcus was the sharpest analyst Clara had ever worked with. and one of the few people who knew the truth about who really controlled Cole Enterprises. Not yet, Clara had said, filing the information away. Let's see how far he takes it. Now apparently she had her answer. Adrien's speech was building to its conclusion. 15 years of growth, of vision, of building something that will last generations, he said, his voice rising with emotion that might have even been partially real. And tonight, I want to share that future with all of you, because Cole Enterprises isn't just about buildings. It's about the people who make them possible. He paused, and something shifted in the room's energy. Clara felt it immediately. The sudden tension, the way Vanessa straightened, the odd smile playing at Adrien's lips. Which is why tonight, I want to recognize someone who has been instrumental to our success, Adrien continued. Someone whose vision and dedication has helped shape this company into what it is today. Clara's fingers tightened slightly on her clutch. Around the ballroom, people were starting to look confused. This wasn't in the program. Vanessa Drake, Adrien said, extending his hand toward his VP. Would you join me on stage? The room went very still. Vanessa climbed the stage steps, her smile brilliant, triumphant. She took Adrien's hand, and Clara saw the way their fingers intertwined. Familiar, intimate, a gesture that spoke of private moments. Vanessa has been more than a colleague, Adrien said, and Clara knew, they all knew, what was coming. She's been a partner in every sense of the word. And tonight, in front of all of you, I want to make that official. He pulled Vanessa close. She came willingly, eagerly, her arms sliding around his neck. And then Adrien Cole kissed his mistress in front of 300 witnesses. The ballroom erupted. Gasps, whispers, a champagne glass hitting the floor and shattering, phones emerging from pockets and purses, cameras clicking, video recording. This was going to be all over social media before the kiss even ended. Clara stood motionless, knowing every eye would turn to her next. Knowing this moment would define her in their minds. The wronged wife, the humiliated woman, the victim of a very public betrayal. Let them think that. The spotlight found her again, cameras swinging her direction, everyone waiting for the tears, the breakdown, the scene. Clara lifted her champagne flute and took a slow, deliberate sip. Then she smiled. Not a devastated smile, not a brave smile, not even an angry smile. A smile of absolute certainty. Because while everyone in this room was watching Adrien Cole claim his mistress and his empire, Clara was the only one who knew the truth. He owned neither. Chichitom. The kiss finally ended. Adrien and Vanessa stood center stage, hands clasped, facing the chaos they'd unleashed. Adrien's expression carried a hint of defiance, as if daring anyone to challenge him. Vanessa glowed with victory. I know this is unexpected, Adrien said into the microphone, his voice cutting through the noise. But life is short, and I believe in being honest about what I want and who I want to build the future with. More whispers. Mayor Richardson looked apoplectic. The Ashford twins were already on their phones, probably calling their divorce attorney contacts. Clara's friend Elizabeth Hartwell pushed through the crowd toward her, face stricken with sympathy Clara didn't need. Clara, Elizabeth whispered urgently when she reached her. Oh my God, are you... I'm fine, Clara said calmly. She set down her champagne flute. Actually, I think I'll head out. I have an early meeting tomorrow. Elizabeth stared at her like she'd grown a second head. You're leaving. Clara, he just... in front of everyone. I know what he did, Clara said. Her voice was gentle but firm. She touched Elizabeth's arm briefly. I promise, I'm fine. Enjoy the rest of the party. She walked toward the exit, her posture perfect, her pace unhurried. People parted for her, their expressions ranging from pity to shock to hungry curiosity. Clara felt their stares but didn't acknowledge them. She'd learned long ago how to move through a room without letting anyone see what she was really thinking. Behind her, Adrien's voice boomed through the speakers again, already spinning the narrative, talking about authenticity and having the courage to pursue happiness. Vanessa laughed at something he said, the sound carrying across the ballroom. Clara stepped into the hotel corridor. The noise of the party faded behind the heavy doors. She pulled out her phone. Marcus answered on the first ring. I'm watching the live stream, he said without preamble. Multiple accounts are already posting video. It'll be trending within the hour. Good, Clara said. Tomorrow morning, I need you to retrieve the original executive employment contract from the secure files, the one Adrien signed when he became CEO. A brief pause. Then Marcus's voice came back, sharper, understanding. The morality clause. Section 7.3, Clara confirmed. Public conduct detrimental to the corporation's reputation and shareholder interest. I want the legal team ready to move by 9 a.m. I'll have everything prepared. She could hear the satisfaction in Marcus's voice. They'd been waiting 12 years for this moment. What about Ms. Drake? Pull her expense reports for the last year. Cross-reference with corporate account activity. I want to know every dinner, every hotel, every transaction she's run through company funds. Already done, Marcus said. I've been tracking since June. She's been sloppy, very sloppy. Clara smiled. Of course she has. She thought she was untouchable. And Mr. Cole? Clara paused at the hotel's entrance. Through the glass doors, she could see her car waiting, her driver standing ready. Beyond that, the Charleston skyline glittered. Every third building a Cole Enterprises property. Or so the world believed. Adrien gets exactly what the contract stipulates, Clara said quietly. Not $1 more than he's legally entitled to. Which, as you know, is nothing. Understood. Clara, Marcus hesitated, something he rarely did. Are you okay? It was a fair question. Most people would be devastated. Most people would be heartbroken, humiliated, destroyed by what had just happened. But Clara had known this was coming, had seen it building for years. The arrogance, the entitlement, the way Adrien had started to believe his own mythology. She'd watched him grow from the charming young analyst she'd fallen for into someone who'd forgotten that charm without substance was just manipulation. And she'd been ready. I'm better than okay, Clara said. I'm free. Chat. She didn't go home immediately. Instead, Clara had her driver take her to the one place in Charleston that Adrien had never touched, never claimed, never even knew existed. The building was a modest brownstone in the historic district, unremarkable among its neighbors. No signage marked it as anything special, but inside, on the third floor, was the office that had controlled every major decision of Cole Enterprises for the past 15 years, the headquarters of Hale Holdings. Clara let herself in with her private key. The office was dark except for the city lights filtering through the tall windows. She didn't turn on the lamps. Instead, she walked to the wall of windows and looked out at Charleston. Her city. Her father's city before her. 4 generations of Hales had built their fortune here, had invested in this place, had shaped it through quiet influence and strategic capital. They'd never needed their names on buildings or their faces in newspapers. Real power, her father used to say, doesn't announce itself. Thomas Hale had been a brilliant investor, a visionary who'd built a financial empire through private equity and strategic real estate holdings. He'd also been a devoted father who'd raised Clara to understand that being underestimated was often an advantage. Let them see what they expect to see, he'd told her when she was young. A woman, a wife, a pretty face at parties. While they're not paying attention, you'll be running the world. He'd died 10 years ago, leaving her the entirety of Hale Holdings. And he'd left her something else too. A piece of advice she'd never forgotten. Choose a partner who adds to your life, not one who needs to diminish you to feel powerful. And if you make a mistake, Clara, if you choose someone who can't see your worth, have the strength to correct it. She'd made a mistake with Adrien. She could admit that now. She'd been 28 when they met, brilliant with numbers but still naive about people. He'd been charming, ambitious, different from the staid men her mother kept introducing her to. She'd thought his hunger for success would complement her strategic mind. Instead, he'd been threatened by it. So she'd hidden it. Built the structure that let him be the face while she controlled the foundation. Created a marriage where she played small so he could feel big. For a while, she'd told herself it was a fair trade. She got the stability of a partnership, the social acceptance of marriage, the cover to run her business without constant scrutiny. He got the capital to build his dreams, and the credit for making them real. But somewhere along the way, Adrien had stopped seeing it as a partnership. He'd started believing his own press releases, started thinking he really had built an empire from nothing, started viewing Clara as an accessory rather than an architect. And then he'd brought Vanessa into it. Clara's phone buzzed, a text from Elizabeth. Are you sure you're okay? I'm so sorry. What can I do? Another from her mother. Call me immediately. This is humiliating. How could he? And one from a number she didn't recognize. Saw the video. Ready to give an interview about your marriage? We'll pay well. Clara deleted that one and turned off her phone. Tomorrow would bring more of the same. Sympathy, gossip, reporters, people who suddenly cared deeply about her feelings. She'd become the story, the wronged woman, the victim. But only temporarily. Because Clara hadn't spent 12 years building an invisible empire just to let Adrien Cole and his mistress write the ending to this story. She finally went home around midnight. The house was a historic mansion in the Battery, worth $8 million according to the last assessment. Adrien loved this house, loved telling people about the restoration work he'd commissioned, the original moldings he'd preserved, the garden he'd designed. He'd designed nothing. Clara's interior architect had done all of it, paid for with Hale Holdings funds, just like everything else. The house was dark and empty when she arrived. Adrien was probably still at the hotel, celebrating with Vanessa, accepting congratulations from sycophants who thought they were witnessing a power move. Clara climbed the stairs to the second floor, to the bedroom she'd been sleeping in alone for the better part of a year. She changed out of her gown, washed her face, and sat down at the antique desk by the window. From the locked bottom drawer, she removed a file. Inside was a copy of the prenuptial agreement Adrien had insisted on 12 years ago. He'd presented it 3 weeks before the wedding, smiling that charming smile, saying it was just a formality, just good business practice. We're building an empire together, he'd said, but we should protect ourselves, right? Keep business business and marriage marriage. Clara had agreed immediately. She'd even signed without a lawyer, to Adrien's surprise and pleasure. He thought he was so clever, protecting his future assets from a wife who might try to take them. He hadn't bothered to read the fine print carefully. Hadn't noticed that the agreement Clara signed specified that any assets acquired during the marriage would remain the separate property of their original owner. And since Hale Holdings owned everything, and since Adrien had never actually owned anything to begin with, the prenup meant that in a divorce, he would leave the marriage with exactly what he'd brought into it. Nothing. Clara pulled out another document. This one was newer, the executive employment contract that Adrien had signed when he became CEO of Cole Enterprises. He'd been so excited that day, so proud of his new title. He'd barely glanced at the 20-page contract before scrawling his signature. She turned to page 14, section 7.3, termination for cause. The company reserves the right to immediately terminate the CEO's employment without severance in the event of A, criminal conduct, B, financial malfeasance, or C, public behavior that materially damages the corporation's reputation, shareholder interests, or business relationships. Adrien had just kissed his mistress in front of Charleston's business elite, 300 witnesses, and countless cameras. Clara was fairly certain that qualified. Her phone lit up with an incoming call despite being on silent. She glanced at the screen. Adrien. She let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text appeared. We need to talk. Where are you? Clara set the phone aside without responding. She wasn't ready to talk to him. Not yet. Not until everything was in place. Another text. Clara, I know you're upset, but we should discuss this like adults. I'll be home in an hour. Adults. As if what he'd done was some mature decision rather than a spectacularly arrogant display of disrespect. Clara stood and walked to the window. From here, she could see the harbor, the lights of the city reflecting on dark water. Tomorrow, Marcus would have the legal team ready. The board of Hale Holdings would convene an emergency meeting. The machinery she'd built over 12 years would finally activate, and Adrien Cole's empire would come crashing down. A car pulled into the driveway. Clara watched Adrien emerge from the back seat, slightly unsteady. He'd been drinking, celebrating, probably. He walked to the front door with the confidence of a man who believed he controlled his world. Clara moved away from the window. She had no interest in confronting him tonight. Instead, she slipped out of the bedroom, down the hall to the guest suite she'd been using more and more frequently over the past months. She locked the door and climbed into bed. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, for the first time in years, Clara Hale slept soundly. Morning came with the harsh light of consequences. Clara woke at 6, showered, and dressed in a charcoal gray suit, professional, powerful, perfect for what was coming. She made coffee in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone as she waited for it to brew. The internet had exploded overnight. Videos of Adrien kissing Vanessa were everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, every major news site. The headlines ranged from salacious, billionaire, CEO's shocking affair revealed at Gala, to speculative, coal enterprises shakeup, CEO's public scandal raises questions, to sympathetic, wife's dignified exit steals show from cheating husband. That last one came with a photo of Clara walking out of the ballroom, her expression serene, her posture perfect. The caption read, "While Adrien Cole made a spectacle, his wife Clara Hale demonstrated true class." Clara almost smiled. They thought her calm was dignity. They had no idea it was strategy. Her phone rang. Marcus. "Good morning," she said. "The internet is on fire," Marcus replied. "We're trending number 3 nationwide, number 1 in South Carolina." "Expected. What about the board?" "Emergency meeting scheduled for 10 a.m. All 7 members confirmed attendance. Legal team is standing by with the termination paperwork. I've also prepared the documentation for Ms. Drake. We found $47,000 in questionable expenses over the last 8 months. Most of it can be directly tied to the affair." Clara took a sip of coffee. "Perfect. What's the media strategy?" "Sarah's team has prepared a statement on your behalf. Very brief, very dignified. Essentially, you appreciate the concern, you're focused on moving forward, you request privacy. It positions you as the sympathetic party without saying anything actionable. Send it out at 9. I want it in the news cycle before the board meeting." "Already scheduled." Marcus paused. "Clara, you should know. Adrien's been calling the office since 7. He's demanding an emergency executive meeting. He sounds agitated." "I'm sure he is." Clara heard movement upstairs. Adrien was awake. "Deny the meeting request. Tell him the board will reach out directly if needed." "Done. One more thing. Vanessa Drake just posted on Instagram." Clara's eyebrows rose. "Did she?" "A photo of her and Adrien from last night. Caption says, 'Finally free to live authentically with the person I love.' It's already got 15,000 comments, most of them calling her various unflattering names." "Screenshot it," Clara said. "It'll be useful evidence of her willingness to publicly associate the affair with the company." Footsteps on the stairs. Adrien, descending. "I have to go," Clara said quietly. "I'll see you at the office." She ended the call as Adrien entered the kitchen. He looked rough. Still wearing yesterday's clothes, hair disheveled, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep or too much celebration or both. When he saw her, his expression cycled through several emotions: guilt, defiance, uncertainty. "Clara," he said. She took another sip of coffee, studying him over the rim of her cup. This man she'd been married to for 12 years, this stranger she'd built an empire around. "You left," Adrien said. He moved to the coffee maker, poured himself a cup with hands that weren't quite steady. "Last night, you just walked out." "Yes." "We need to talk about this." "Do we?" He turned to face her, leaning against the counter, trying to look relaxed, in control, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "Clara, I know last night was unexpected, but I think we both know our marriage has been over for a while. Have we both known that? Come on." Adrien's voice took on that reasonable tone he used in negotiations. "We've been living separate lives for months. You have your charity work, I have the company. We barely see each other. This isn't a real marriage anymore." Clara set down her coffee cup. "I see." "I didn't mean to hurt you," Adrien continued, warming up now, getting into his speech. He'd probably been practicing it. "But Vanessa and I, what we have is real. It's a genuine partnership. She understands the business, understands my vision. We work together." "She's your employee." "She's my equal," Adrien corrected. "And I think, if you're honest with yourself, you'll admit that you and I were never equals. We wanted different things. You wanted a quiet life, charity galas, book clubs. I needed someone who could match my ambition." It took every ounce of Clara's self-control not to laugh. Someone who could match his ambition. This man who'd never had an original business idea in his life. This man whose entire empire existed because of capital she'd provided. I see, she said again. Adrien seemed encouraged by her calm. I want to be fair about this. The prenup is clear, but I'm willing to be generous. I'll make sure you're taken care of. The house, a settlement, whatever you need to maintain your lifestyle. That's very kind of you. I am trying to be kind, Adrien said. He actually sounded like he believed it. Despite what people might think, I do care about you, Clara. We had good years together, but it's time we both moved on. I'm prepared to start divorce proceedings immediately. Quick, clean, amicable. We can announce it as a mutual decision. Clara stood. She smoothed down her suit jacket. I'm afraid I have a meeting this morning. We can discuss this later. Adrien frowned. Clara, did you hear what I said? I want a divorce. I'm with Vanessa now. Last night made that clear. Yes, Clara said. Last night made many things clear. I really do have to go. She picked up her purse and walked toward the door. Clara! Adrien's voice rose, frustrated now. We need to settle this. I have lawyers ready to draw up papers. I need you to cooperate. She paused at the doorway, looked back at him. This man who'd taken everything she'd given him and convinced himself he'd earned it. This man who was about to learn the hardest lesson of his life. Adrien, she said quietly, I'll give you some advice. Call your lawyer. Have them review your employment contract with Cole Enterprises very carefully, particularly Section 7.3. She left him standing in the kitchen, confusion spreading across his face. The offices of Hale Holdings occupied an entire floor of a building Clara's grandfather had purchased in 1952. It was understated from the outside, elegant within, all dark wood and leather, the kind of old money aesthetic that whispered power rather than shouting it. Clara arrived at 8:30. The staff was already there, moving with purpose. They all knew what today meant. They'd been preparing for it in various ways for years. Marcus met her at the elevator, tablet in hand. Media statement went out at 9 as planned. We're already getting requests for interviews, 63 and counting. I'm routing them all to Sarah's team with a standard decline. Good. Clara walked to her office, Marcus following. Board meeting status? Conference room is set up, legal team is in the building, the termination documents are ready for signature. We've also prepared the communications to all Cole Enterprises employees announcing the change in leadership. Clara set her purse down, looking out at Charleston's skyline. From here she could see 3 Cole Enterprises buildings. By noon, they'd have a new name. Have we heard from Adrien? He's called 14 times. He's currently in the lobby demanding to speak with you. Let him wait. At 9:45, Clara's phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. Clara Hale, Mrs. Hale, this is Rebecca Sanders from the Charleston Post. I'm writing a story about last night's incident at the Gala. Would you care to comment? My office released a statement this morning. Yes, but I was hoping for something more personal. How are you feeling? What was going through your mind when you saw your husband kiss another woman? Clara's voice stayed level. I have no additional comment at this time. Are you planning to divorce? Will you seek a settlement? Sources say Cole Enterprises is worth over $2 billion. Ms. Sanders, Clara interrupted gently, I suggest you speak with Cole Enterprises' legal team about the corporate structure. I think you'll find the situation more complex than you realize. Now, if you'll excuse me. She ended the call. Marcus was watching her with a slight smile. Planting seeds? He asked. Preparing the ground, Clara corrected. At 10 o'clock precisely, she walked into the conference room. The board of Hale Holdings consisted of 7 members, Clara as chairman, Marcus as CFO, 3 external financial advisors who'd worked with her father, and 2 family friends who'd known Clara since childhood. Every person in that room understood exactly what they were there to do. Good morning, Clara said, taking her seat at the head of the table. Thank you all for convening on short notice. I trust everyone has seen the coverage from last night's event. Heads nodded around the table. Then you know we have a situation that requires immediate action, Clara continued. Marcus, please present the documentation. Marcus pulled up a screen showing the footage from last night, Adrien and Vanessa's kiss in high definition from 3 different angles. Then he displayed screenshots of Vanessa's Instagram post, news headlines, and trending social media topics. As of 9 a.m. this morning, Marcus said, Cole Enterprises has been mentioned in over 15,000 social media posts, 90% of them negative. Our corporate communications line has received 217 calls, including inquiries from investors, business partners, and media outlets. The mayor's office has reached out expressing concern about our current projects with the city. He clicked to another slide. The reputational damage is significant and measurable. More importantly, it directly violates Section 7.3 of CEO Adrien Cole's employment contract. The employment contract appeared on screen, the relevant section highlighted. Under the terms Mr. Cole agreed to when accepting the position of CEO, Marcus continued, the board has the right to immediately terminate his employment for public behavior that materially damages the corporation's reputation or business relationships. Given the documented impact of last night's incident, legal counsel advises we have clear grounds for termination without severance. One of the advisors, James Chen, spoke up. What's our liability exposure if we proceed? Minimal, the corporate attorney, Patricia Ross, answered. The contract language is explicit and broadly written. Mr. Cole's behavior was public, witnessed by hundreds, and documented extensively. He'd have almost no basis for a wrongful termination suit. What about Ms. Drake? Another board member asked. Marcus pulled up a new document. Vanessa Drake's expense reports show multiple violations of corporate policy. She's charged personal expenses to company accounts, including dinners, hotels, and travel that were not business-related. We have documentation of at least $47,000 in inappropriate charges. Additionally, her public social media post linking herself and Mr. Cole romantically while identifying herself as a Cole Enterprises executive creates additional reputation issues. Recommendation? Clara asked, though she already knew the answer. Immediate termination for both, Patricia said. We move decisively, we move legally, and we move now before they have time to mount any defense or counter-narrative. Clara looked around the table. Any objections? Silence. These people had watched Adrien Cole parade around their company for 12 years, claiming credit for work he hadn't done, building a personal brand on capital he hadn't earned. They'd been patient, professional, silent, not anymore. Then we vote, Clara said. All in favor of immediately terminating Adrien Cole as CEO of Cole Enterprises, effective immediately for cause as specified in his employment contract? 7 hands rose. And all in favor of terminating Vanessa Drake as vice president for policy violations and conduct detrimental to the corporation? 7 hands again. Clara felt something settle in her chest. Not satisfaction exactly, more like completion. The end of something that should have ended long ago. Motion carries unanimously, she said. Patricia, execute the terminations. Marcus, prepare the employee communications. And someone please inform Mr. Cole that his access to all Cole Enterprises facilities and systems has been revoked, effective immediately. He's still in the lobby downstairs, Marcus said. Clara stood. Then I suppose I should deliver the news personally. Adrien was pacing near the elevators when Clara emerged. He spun toward her, his expression a mixture of anger and relief. Finally, he said. Clara, what the hell is going on? I've been trying to reach you all morning. They won't let me into my own building. It's not your building, Clara said quietly. What? It was never your building, Adrien, or your company, or your empire. She gestured toward the conference room. Would you like to discuss this privately, or would you prefer to do it here in the lobby? Something in her tone must have gotten through. Adrien's face went pale. What are you talking about? Conference room 3. Now. She led him to a small meeting room, Marcus following with his tablet. Adrien kept looking between them, confusion shifting to something like fear. Clara, what is this? He asked as the door closed. She slid a document across the table. Your termination notice. The Board of Hale Holdings, which owns Cole Enterprises, has voted to immediately end your employment as CEO, effective this morning. You're being terminated for cause under Section 7.3 of your contract. Adrien stared at the paper like it was written in a foreign language. This is insane. You can't... I'm the CEO. I built this company. You can't just fire me. We can, and we have. Clara's voice remained calm. Your contract was very clear about the terms. Your public behavior last night materially damaged the corporation's reputation. The board voted unanimously. What board? Clara, this is ridiculous. Cole Enterprises doesn't answer to... He stopped, the words dying as realization started to dawn. Hale Holdings? My family's private equity firm. We've owned 75% of Cole Enterprises since its founding. You were always an employee, Adrien. A very well-compensated employee, but an employee nonetheless. The color drained from his face. That's impossible. I built this company from nothing. You built nothing, Clara said, and for the first time let an edge of steel into her voice. Every property, every development, every deal was funded by Hale Holdings. My family's capital. My capital. You were the face, Adrien, the spokesman, but you never owned any of it. He sat down heavily. You're lying. You're trying to punish me for Vanessa, for last night. Marcus pulled up documents on his tablet, turned it so Adrien could see. Here's the corporate structure of Cole Enterprises. Hale Holdings as majority owner. Here's the initial capitalization documents from 15 years ago. All Hale family funds. Here's... Stop, Adrien whispered. He was scanning the documents, seeing his signature, seeing the truth he'd been too arrogant to notice. Why didn't you tell me? You never asked, Clara said simply. You were very happy to believe you'd built an empire. I saw no reason to correct you, until last night. Adrien's head snapped up. This is about the affair, about me choosing Vanessa. No, Adrien, this is about you violating your contract. The affair is just what made it public. Clara leaned forward. Did you really think you could humiliate the company at its own anniversary gala in front of investors and business partners and the media, and there would be no consequences? I wasn't humiliating the company. I was being honest about my relationship. You made a spectacle. You embarrassed our partners. You damaged relationships it took years to build, and you did it because you thought you were untouchable. Clara's voice stayed level, but her words cut. You forgot that being the face of something doesn't mean you own it. Adrien stood abruptly, sending his chair scraping back. You can't do this. I'll fight it. I'll sue. You'll lose, Patricia Ross said from the doorway. She entered, setting down another stack of documents. Your contract is airtight, Mr. Cole, and under the terms of the prenuptial agreement you insisted on 12 years ago, you have no claim to any marital assets either. Everything belongs to its original owner, which means everything belongs to the Hale family trust. The prenup? Adrien's face went gray. That was to protect my assets from... He stopped, understanding flooding in. You knew. Even then, you knew. I knew you'd never bothered to build anything of your own, Clara said. Yes. Adrien lunged forward, hands slamming on the table. You conniving bitch. You set me up. This whole time you were... Security, Marcus said into his phone, his voice utterly calm. 2 uniformed guards appeared in the doorway. Mr. Cole was just leaving, Marcus said. Please escort him from the building. He no longer has access to any Cole Enterprises facilities. This isn't over, Adrien shouted as the guards moved toward him. I'll destroy you for this, Clara. I'll tell everyone what you did, how you manipulated everything. Tell them, Clara said quietly. Tell them that a woman outmaneuvered you, that you were so busy taking credit that you never bothered to read what you were signing, that you mistook a facade for reality and a partnership for ownership. Please, Adrien, tell everyone. The guards took his arms. Adrien struggled for a moment, then seemed to deflate. I gave you 12 years, he said, his voice broken. I loved you. No, Clara said. You loved what I gave you. There's a difference. She watched them escort him out, watched the man who'd stood on stage last night, so confident in his power, being walked out of his own lobby by security. Former lobby, former company, former empire. Marcus handed her another document. Ms. Drake? Send the termination notice by courier. I want it delivered to her apartment within the hour. Already en route. Clara took a breath. 12 years. It had taken 12 years to reach this moment. 12 years of playing small, of letting Adrien believe his own mythology, of building the structure that would allow her to take back what was always hers. Her phone buzzed. A text from Elizabeth. Just saw the news that Adrien was fired. Clara, oh my God, are you okay? Another from the mayor's office. Mrs. Hale, we'd appreciate a meeting at your earliest convenience regarding ongoing city projects. And one from a reporter. Sources say you own Cole Enterprises. Is this true? Please confirm. The truth was starting to spread. Clara looked at Marcus. What's next? Press conference at 2. We announce the leadership transition and the company rebrand. Then we have meetings with the executive team to ensure continuity. And at 4, we have the interview with Forbes. They want to do a profile on the hidden billionaire who just took down her husband's empire. Cancel the Forbes interview, Clara said. I don't need a profile. I need to rebuild this company properly. Understood. She walked to the window, looked out at the skyline one more time. Tomorrow the Cole name would start coming off buildings. New leadership would be announced. The narrative would shift from Adrien's empire to something real, something solid, something hers. Her phone rang. Her mother. Hello, Mother. Clara Elizabeth Hale, her mother said, voice shaking with emotion. I just heard. Please tell me this is true. Please tell me you finally stood up to that man. It's true. Her mother made a sound between a sob and a laugh. Your father would be so proud, so incredibly proud. Clara smiled, tears pricking her eyes for the first time that day. I know. She ended the call and turned to Marcus. Let's get to work. We have a company to rebuild. Yes, ma'am, Marcus said. Welcome back, boss. And for the first time in 12 years, Clara Hale stepped fully into the light as the person she'd always been. Not the invisible wife, not the silent partner, but the architect of an empire that had never belonged to anyone but her. The Queen had returned, and she was just getting started. The press conference room at the Belmont Grand Hotel was packed by 1:30. Clara had chosen the same venue deliberately, the same building where Adrien had kissed Vanessa less than 24 hours ago. The same ballroom where he'd claimed his empire in front of Charleston's elite. Now she would reclaim it. Marcus stood beside her in the preparation room, reviewing the statement one final time. The media turnout is bigger than expected. We have local stations, regional press, Bloomberg, the Wall Street Journal, and about 30 freelancers who smell blood in the water. Good, Clara said, checking her reflection in the mirror. She'd chosen a navy suit, simple jewelry, her hair pulled back in a professional twist. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who meant business. Are you nervous? Marcus asked. Clara considered the question. 24 hours ago, she'd been the invisible wife. Now she was about to step in front of cameras and claim ownership of a $2 billion empire. She should be nervous, but all she felt was ready. No, she said. I've been preparing for this my entire life. I just didn't know it. Sarah Kim, their communications director, poked her head in. We're ready when you are, Clara. Full house. They're hungry for answers. Clara took a breath and walked toward the door. Behind her, Marcus said quietly, Your father would be incredibly proud right now. She paused, looked back at him. I know, that's the only opinion that matters. The conference room erupted in camera flashes as she entered. Clara took her position at the podium, waiting for the noise to settle. She could see familiar faces in the crowd. Reporters who'd covered Cole Enterprises for years, business journalists who'd interviewed Adrien dozens of times, local personalities who'd attended last night's gala. They were all staring at her like they'd never seen her before. In a way, they hadn't. Good afternoon, Clara began, her voice steady and clear. Thank you for coming on short notice. I'll make a brief statement, then take a few questions. She looked directly into the cameras. As of 10 o'clock this morning, the board of Hale Holdings voted to terminate Adrien Cole's employment as CEO of Cole Enterprises, effective immediately. This decision was made in accordance with his executive contract, specifically Section 7.3, which allows for immediate termination in cases of public conduct detrimental to the corporation. Murmurs rippled through the room. Hands shot up. Clara continued, For those unfamiliar with the corporate structure, Hale Holdings is a private equity firm founded by my late father, Thomas Hale, in 1987. Hale Holdings has been the majority owner of Cole Enterprises since its inception 15 years ago, controlling 75% of the company's equity. More murmurs, louder now. She saw journalists frantically typing, others whispering to colleagues. I am the chairman and majority shareholder of Hale Holdings. I have been since my father's death in 2014. This means that while Adrien Cole served as the public face of Cole Enterprises, the company's capital structure, strategic direction, and ownership have always resided with the Hale family. A reporter in the front row couldn't contain himself. Mrs. Hale, are you saying you've secretly owned the company this whole time? Clara met his eyes. There was nothing secret about it. The corporate filings are public record. Anyone who cared to look would have found them. Most people simply didn't look. Why reveal this now? Another reporter called out. I'm not revealing anything that wasn't already true, Clara said calmly. I'm simply clarifying what seems to have been a widespread misunderstanding. Adrien Cole was an employee, a talented one, a well-compensated one, but an employee nonetheless. When his behavior violated the terms of his employment, the board took appropriate action. Is this about the affair? Someone shouted. This is about breach of contract, Clara corrected. Mr. Cole's personal choices are his own business, but when those choices are made publicly, in a manner that damages corporate relationships and reputation, they become the board's business. A woman from Bloomberg stood. What happens to Cole Enterprises now? The company will undergo a rebranding process over the next 6 months. We'll be announcing a new CEO within the week. Our projects will continue. Our commitments to partners and clients will be honored, and our business operations will proceed without interruption. Will you be the new CEO? The Bloomberg reporter pressed. Clara paused. She could feel the weight of the moment, the cameras recording every word, every expression. This was the question that mattered, the one that would define how people saw her moving forward. I will be taking an active role in the company's leadership during the transition, she said carefully. The specific title matters less than the work. My focus is on ensuring Cole Enterprises becomes what it was always meant to be, a corporation that builds value for communities, not just monuments to individual ego. That got their attention. More hands waved. Mrs. Hale, what about Vanessa Drake? Mrs. Drake's employment was also terminated this morning for violations of corporate policy unrelated to her personal relationship with Mr. Cole. There are rumors she misused company funds. We don't comment on personnel matters beyond confirming the termination, Clara cut in smoothly. Any further questions should be directed to our legal team. A local reporter stood. Clara, you've been married to Adrien for 12 years. How does it feel to fire your own husband? Clara's expression didn't change. I didn't fire my husband. The board terminated an employee who violated his contract. The fact that he's also my spouse is unfortunate, but irrelevant to the business decision. Are you getting divorced? My personal life remains personal, Clara said. Next question. What do you say to critics who might claim this is revenge for the affair? Clara leaned forward slightly, her voice carrying across the room. I would say those critics are missing the point entirely. This isn't about revenge, it's about accountability. Adrien Cole stood on a stage last night and made a choice that had professional consequences. He gambled that he was too important to face those consequences. He was wrong. The room went quiet. Clara could see it sinking in. The realization that this wasn't a scorned wife lashing out. This was a businesswoman enforcing a contract. 2 more questions, Sarah announced from the side. Mrs. Hale, a reporter from the Wall Street Journal called out. You've operated in the background for years. Why stay hidden? Why let your husband take credit for your company? It was a fair question. Clara had asked herself the same thing many times over the past 12 years. I wasn't hiding, she said finally. I was working. There's a difference. My father taught me that real power doesn't need public recognition. It needs results. While Adrien was giving interviews and accepting awards, I was structuring deals, managing portfolios, and building the actual foundation of this company. She paused, then added, But you're right that there's a cost to being invisible. People assume you're not there. They underestimate you. And sometimes, as we've seen, they forget entirely who actually owns what they're standing on. Final question, Sarah said. A young woman in the back stood. What do you want people to know about you now? Clara considered. What did she want people to know? That she was smart? They'd figure that out? That she was powerful? The numbers would speak for themselves. That she'd been wronged? She didn't need their pity. I want people to know that Hale Holdings isn't going anywhere, she said. We've been investing in Charleston for 4 generations. We'll be here for 4 more. The name on the buildings might change, but the commitment doesn't. That's what matters. She stepped back from the podium. Thank you all for coming. The room erupted with more questions, but Clara was already walking toward the exit, Marcus and Sarah flanking her. Behind them, the press conference dissolved into chaos, reporters calling their editors, cameras being packed up, the buzz of a story that was going to dominate the news cycle for days. In the hallway, Clara finally let herself breathe. "That was perfect," Sarah said, her eyes bright with professional satisfaction. "Confident, clear, no emotion, pure business. The narrative is shifting exactly where we want it." "The phones are already ringing," Marcus added, checking his tablet. 3 investment firms want meetings. The mayor's office called again, and we have interview requests from every major business publication. "Decline the interviews for now," Clara said. "Accept the investment meetings. And tell the mayor I'll see him tomorrow at 10. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it. Elizabeth again, this time with a string of shocked emojis and the message, "You own the company? Clara, call me immediately." Clara smiled slightly but didn't respond. Elizabeth would wait. Everything would wait. Right now, she had an empire to reorganize. They took the private elevator to the parking garage. Clara's car was waiting, her driver holding the door open. But before she could get in, another car pulled up sharply, tires squealing. Adrien climbed out. He looked worse than he had that morning, rumpled, unshaven, wild around the eyes. He'd been drinking, Clara could tell immediately. Not fall-down drunk, but enough to loosen whatever control he'd been maintaining. "Clara!" he shouted across the garage. "We need to talk. Right now." Marcus stepped forward, but Clara put a hand on his arm. "It's fine. I'll handle this." "You sure?" Marcus's voice was low, concerned. "Positive. Wait in the car." Marcus hesitated, then nodded and stepped back, though he didn't go far. Clara walked toward Adrien, stopping a careful distance away. "What do you want, Adrien?" "What do I want?" He laughed, the sound bitter and harsh. "I want to know what the hell you think you're doing. That press conference telling the whole world you own my company. It was never your company," Clara said quietly. "We've established that." Bullshit," Adrien's voice echoed off the concrete walls. "I built Cole Enterprises from nothing. Me, not you, not your dead father, not some holding company. I made the deals. I designed the projects. I put in the work." "With capital you didn't earn," Clara said. "With resources you didn't provide. Adrien, you were a project manager with a CEO title. That's all you ever were." His face flushed dark red. "You're rewriting history. You were a silent partner at best. You attended some board meetings, signed some papers. You didn't build anything." "I built everything," Clara said, and for the first time let real emotion into her voice. "Every deal you made was funded by my family's money. Every property you developed was financed through my capital. Every success you claimed was made possible by infrastructure I created. You were the face, Adrien. I was the foundation. And you were so busy enjoying the spotlight that you never bothered to look at what was holding you up." "That's not how it happened. That's exactly how it happened," Clara cut him off. "And deep down, you know it. You know you never had an original idea in your life. You know every business plan you presented was vetted by my analysts first. You know the only reason banks gave you credit was because Hale Holdings guaranteed your loans." Adrien's hands clenched into fists. "You're trying to erase me, make it like I was nothing." "You weren't nothing," Clara said, and meant it. "You were good at what you did. Charismatic, persuasive, excellent at client relations. But those are employee skills, Adrien, not owner skills, not founder skills. You were never the genius you thought you were." "And you are?" His voice dripped with contempt. "You who spent 12 years hiding behind me, who never had the courage to step out of the shadows and claim anything." "I didn't need to claim what I already owned," Clara said simply. "And I wasn't hiding. I was watching, waiting to see if you'd ever develop the integrity to match your ambition. You didn't." Adrien stepped closer, and Clara held her ground despite Marcus moving forward in her peripheral vision. "This is about Vanessa," Adrien said, his voice dropping. "That's what this is really about. You're punishing me for moving on, for finding someone who actually understands me." "Vanessa understood nothing about you," Clara said. "She saw a CEO with access to corporate accounts and mistook it for personal wealth. She thought she was trading up. By now, she's probably realized she was trading sideways, into unemployment and a fraud investigation. You destroyed her career. She destroyed her own career when she started charging personal expenses to company accounts," Clara interrupted. "We have documentation, Adrien. $47,000 in fraudulent charges, hotels, dinners, travel. She was sloppy, arrogant, and careless, just like you. Adrien's face twisted. You're going to regret this. I'll sue. I'll fight you on every level. I'll make sure everyone knows what a manipulative, cold-hearted— Do it, Clara said calmly. Sue me. Fight me. Tell everyone how terrible I am. But you'll lose, Adrien. You'll lose because the contracts are airtight, the corporate structure is documented, and the prenup you insisted on protects exactly what you thought it would: the assets of the original owner, which isn't you. She turned to leave, but Adrien grabbed her arm. Marcus was there instantly, stepping between them. Don't touch her, Marcus said, his voice cold steel. Adrien released her but didn't back down. 12 years, Clara. I gave you 12 years of my life. Clara looked at him, really looked at him, and tried to remember the man she'd married, the charming analyst with big dreams and infectious enthusiasm. When had he turned into this? When had the ambition curdled into arrogance? When had the confidence become delusion? Or had he always been this way, and she'd just been too young to see it? You gave me 12 years of lies, she said quietly. 12 years of taking credit for work you didn't do. 12 years of making me feel small so you could feel big. And last night you stood on a stage and humiliated me in front of the entire city because you thought I was too weak to do anything about it. I never said you were weak. You didn't have to say it. You showed it every time you dismissed my opinions in meetings. Every time you took sole credit for joint decisions. Every time you introduced me as just my wife instead of your business partner. You showed it every single day of our marriage, Adrien. And I let you because I thought we were building something together. Her voice cracked slightly, but she steadied it. But we weren't building anything. You were taking what I built and slapping your name on it. Well, no more. The building stops. The taking stops. And you're going to have to learn to stand on your own foundation, if you even have one. She walked past him toward the car. This time, he didn't try to stop her. You'll be sorry, Adrien called after her. When you're alone in that big house with nothing but your money and your pride, you'll realize what you lost. Clara paused at the car door. Without turning around, she said, I lost you 12 years ago, Adrien. I just didn't admit it until now. The only thing I'm sorry about is not doing this sooner. She got in the car. Marcus slid in beside her, and the driver pulled away smoothly, leaving Adrien standing alone in the parking garage. They drove in silence for several blocks. Clara stared out the window, watching Charleston pass by. The historic homes, the church steeples, the waterfront where her father used to take her as a child. Are you okay? Marcus asked finally. Clara wiped at her eyes, surprised to find them wet. I don't know. Ask me tomorrow. For what it's worth, you handled that with more grace than he deserved. Grace is all I have left when it comes to him, Clara said. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through the mounting messages. Most were supportive. Some were congratulatory. A few were from people she hadn't heard from in years, suddenly very interested in reconnecting now that she was publicly powerful. One message stood out. From Vanessa Drake. You think you've won. You haven't. Adrien and I will fight this. You'll regret destroying us. Clara showed it to Marcus. He read it and snorted. She still doesn't get it. Neither of them do, Clara said. They think this is about winning and losing, about revenge and destruction. They can't comprehend that it's just business. Is it? Marcus asked quietly. Just business? Clara considered. Was it just business? Or was there a part of her, maybe a small part, maybe not so small, that had enjoyed watching Adrien's face when he realized the truth? That had felt satisfaction when security escorted him out of his own lobby? No, she admitted. It's not just business. It's justice. There's a difference. Her phone rang. Her mother. Hello, Mother. I'm at the house, Catherine Hale said, watching the press conference replay on the news. Clara, they're calling you the hidden billionaire. There's a whole segment analyzing how you stayed in the shadows for so long. I saw. They're also running clips of Adrien from various interviews over the years, showing how he always took sole credit. It's making him look terrible. That's not my doing, Clara said. That's just facts catching up with fiction. Her mother's voice softened. How are you holding up, sweetheart? Really? Clara looked out at the city again. How was she holding up? She'd just blown up her marriage, destroyed her husband's career, and exposed a truth that would change how Charleston's elite viewed both of them. Tomorrow she'd wake up not as the invisible wife, but as the woman who'd orchestrated one of the most dramatic corporate takedowns in the city's history. "I'm tired," she admitted, "but I'm good. Better than I've been in years, actually. Your father always said the truth would set you free. He just never mentioned how exhausting freedom could be." Clara smiled despite herself. "He left that part out, didn't he?" "Come by for dinner tonight," her mother said. "Just the two of us. We can celebrate properly. I'll make your favorite." "I can't tonight. I have meetings until late. But soon, I promise." "Hold them to that promise," her mother said firmly. "And Clara, I'm proud of you. So incredibly proud." After they hung up, Clara leaned back against the seat. Through the partition, she could see her driver navigating traffic, steady and professional. How many times had she sat in this car, being driven to charity events and gallery openings and dinners, where she smiled and made small talk while Adrien networked? Those days were over. "Where to?" Marcus asked. "The office," Clara said. "We have a company to rebuild." The Hale Holdings office was buzzing when they arrived. Staff members who'd been with the company for years moved with renewed energy, freed from the charade of pretending Adrien Cole was their actual boss. Clara could feel the shift in atmosphere, from careful performance to authentic purpose. Her office overlooked the harbor. Clara stood at the window, watching boats move across the water, while Marcus briefed her on the afternoon's developments. Legal called. Adrien's attorney reached out, asking about severance negotiations. What did Patricia say? That the contract is clear. 0 severance for termination with cause. If he wants to dispute it, he can file suit, but we're confident in our position. Good. What else? Vanessa Drake posted a long statement on social media claiming she's the victim of a vindictive wife who can't handle her husband's success. It's getting torn apart in the comments, but she's doubling down. Claire shook her head. "Well, let her. The fraud documentation speaks for itself. The mayor wants to discuss the waterfront development project. He's concerned about continuity. Tell him we're committed to the project. In fact, we're going to expand it. I want to add affordable housing units, real ones, not the luxury condos Adrien had planned." Marcus made a note. "That'll change the profit margins." "I don't care. This company has been chasing profit over purpose for too long. That changes now." She turned from the window to face him. "Marcus, I want you to pull together a team. Our best analysts, project managers, and community relations people. We're going to review every single project currently in development and ask one question. Does this make Charleston better, or does it just make us richer? And if it's just the latter, we restructure it, even if it costs us money, even if it pisses off investors. We do it right, or we don't do it at all." Marcus studied her for a moment. "This is going to upset a lot of people who like the way Adrien ran things." "Then they can find another company to invest in," Clara said firmly. "I'm not interested in building monuments to wealth. I want to build things that last, things that matter, things my father would have been proud of." "He would be proud of you," Marcus said. "For the record," Clara felt emotion tighten her throat again. She pushed it down, staying focused. "Start with the Harbor Point project. I want a full review by Friday, and set up a meeting with the design team. I have ideas about green spaces and public access." "On it." Marcus paused at the door. "Clara, you should eat something. You've been running on adrenaline and coffee since 6 a.m. "I'll grab something later." "That's what you said 3 hours ago. I'm ordering food. You're eating it. Non-negotiable." Clara smiled. "When did you become so bossy?" "When my boss became a media sensation who forgot she's human." He left before she could argue. Alone in her office, Clara sat down at her desk. Her father's desk, actually. Solid oak, built in 1952, scarred with decades of use. She ran her hand over the surface, remembering watching her father work here when she was young, fascinated by the papers and files and important-looking documents. "Business is simple," he used to tell her. "Find something people need, provide it honestly, build something that lasts. Everything else is just noise." Adrien had loved the noise, the awards, the interviews, the attention. He thought that was what success looked like. Recognition, celebration, his name on everything. But real success was quieter. It was the buildings that housed families, the developments that created communities, the investments that built futures. It didn't need applause. It just needed to work. Clara pulled up the files on their current projects. 23 developments in various stages, billions of dollars in play, thousands of jobs at stake. And all of it, every single bit of it, had been built on the foundation her family created. Her phone buzzed with the text from Elizabeth. Okay, seriously, are we going to talk about the fact that you're apparently a secret billionaire? How did I not know this? How does anyone not know this? Clara typed back. Same way people don't know a lot of things. They don't ask. You could have told me. And said what? By the way, I actually own my husband's company. Would you have believed me? A pause, then. Fair point. Lunch tomorrow? I need the full story. Like, the full story. Can't tomorrow. Buried in transition work. But soon. You better. I have so many questions, starting with, how are you so calm about all this? Clara stared at that question. How was she so calm? Her marriage was over. Her name was all over the news. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new problems, new people trying to figure out how to navigate this new reality where Clara Hale wasn't invisible anymore. But underneath it all, beneath the chaos and the drama and the uncertainty, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Relief. Relief that the performance was over. Relief that she didn't have to pretend anymore. Relief that she could finally be herself. Not Adrien's wife, not the silent partner, not the woman in the background. Just Clara. Owner, strategist, builder, herself. She texted Elizabeth back. I'm calm because I'm finally telling the truth. And the truth is lighter than lies ever were. Marcus returned with food, Thai takeout from her favorite place. They ate at the conference table, discussing strategy and reviewing the day's media coverage. The narrative was shifting exactly as they'd hoped. Adrien was being portrayed as the arrogant CEO who'd overestimated his power. Clara was emerging as the strategic mastermind who'd been running things all along. It wasn't entirely accurate. Adrien had contributed real value in the early years, had genuinely helped build the company's reputation. But nuance didn't sell newspapers, and right now, Clara needed the narrative to be clear. She'd always been in control, and now everyone knew it. By 7 p.m., exhaustion was catching up with her. Marcus noticed her flagging and insisted she go home. You need rest, he said. Tomorrow's going to be just as intense, maybe more. Clara didn't argue. She gathered her things, said goodnight to the staff still working, and headed down to her car. The drive home was quiet. Clara watched the city lights blur past, her mind already on tomorrow's meetings, tomorrow's decisions, tomorrow's challenges. It wasn't until she pulled into the driveway that she remembered. Adrien might be home. The house was dark. Clara let herself in cautiously, listening for signs of occupation. Nothing. She checked the garage. His car was gone. Checked his closet, half empty, clothes missing. He'd moved out. Clara stood in the empty master bedroom, looking at the gaps where his things used to be. The missing suits, the empty dresser drawers, the space where his watch collection had lived. 12 years of marriage, packed up and gone in an afternoon. She should feel something, shouldn't she? Sadness? Loss? Grief for what might have been? Instead, she felt the same relief that had been building all day. This house had never really been theirs. It had been hers, like everything else, and he'd just been living in it. Now she could make it feel like home again. Clara changed into comfortable clothes, poured herself a glass of wine, and sat on the terrace overlooking the garden. The night was warm, the city humming in the distance. She could hear music from somewhere down the street, laughter from a neighboring house. Normal life, continuing despite the earthquake that had just rocked her world. Her phone buzzed one more time. An email from Patricia Ross with the subject line, Adrien Cole, attempted settlement negotiation. Clara opened it. Clara, Mr. Cole's attorney, reached out again this evening with a settlement proposal. In summary, he's offering to sign divorce papers without contest in exchange for a lump sum payment of $50 million and an agreement not to pursue legal action regarding his termination. He seems to believe he has leverage for negotiation. He does not. Advise how you'd like to proceed. Patricia Clara read it twice, then typed her response. Patricia, counteroffer, $0, standard divorce proceedings per the prenuptial agreement, and we reserve all rights to pursue legal remedies if he attempts to disparage the company publicly. If he doesn't like it, he can sue. We'll see him in court. Clara. She hit send and set the phone aside. $50 million. Adrien actually thought he could negotiate a payout after being fired for cause. The audacity would be impressive if it wasn't so delusional. Clara finished her wine and went inside. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new complications. Tonight, she needed rest. But as she climbed the stairs to the bedroom, her bedroom now, not theirs, Clara felt something shift inside her. The weight she'd been carrying for 12 years, the burden of performing, of hiding, of making herself smaller so Adrien could feel bigger. It was gone. And in its place was something stronger, something solid, purpose. She had an empire to rebuild, a company to transform, a city to improve. And for the first time in 12 years, she could do it as herself. The queen had reclaimed her throne. Now the real work could begin. The morning sun cut through Clara's bedroom window at 6:15, exactly as it always did. She'd been awake for 20 minutes already, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling, her mind running through the day's agenda. Meeting with the mayor at 10, executive team briefing at 11, legal review at 2. Interview with the business reporter at 4. Despite her initial reluctance, Marcus had convinced her that controlling the narrative meant participating in it. And somewhere in there, she needed to sign the paperwork that would officially rename Cole Enterprises. Clara showered, dressed in a charcoal pantsuit, and was downstairs making coffee when her phone rang. Patricia Ross calling before 7 a.m. That was never a good sign. "Tell me," Clara said by way of greeting. "Adrien filed an injunction last night," Patricia said without preamble. "He's trying to block the company rebrand and halt all major business decisions until the divorce is finalized. His lawyer claims you're acting out of spite rather than business interests, and that any corporate changes made during this period are suspect." Clara's hand tightened on her coffee cup. "On what grounds?" "Emotional distress, conflict of interest, and, this is my favorite part, temporary insanity brought on by the trauma of public humiliation." "He's claiming I'm insane." "Temporarily insane. Important distinction, apparently." Patricia's voice dripped with sarcasm. "It's a desperate move, Clara. No judge is going to grant this. The corporate structure is clear. You have every legal right to make business decisions, and your behavior has been nothing but professional throughout. But it will slow things down. We'll need to respond, file counter motions, and possibly appear in court." Clara walked to the window, looking out at her garden. The roses needed trimming. She'd been meaning to do it for weeks, but had never found the time. Now she wondered if she'd ever find the time again. "How long?" she asked. "Could be a few days, could be a few weeks. Depends on the judge's schedule and how much nonsense Adrien's lawyer wants to throw at the wall. And in the meantime, we proceed carefully. Document everything, maintain absolute professionalism, and build an ironclad case that every decision you make is sound business practice. No emotional reactions, no impulsive moves, everything by the book." Clara smiled without humor. "Patricia, I've been doing everything by the book for 15 years. I think I can manage a few more weeks." "I know you can. I just wanted to warn you before you saw it in the news. Adrien's lawyer leaked the filing to the press. It'll be all over the morning shows." Of course he did. Adrien couldn't win in the boardroom, so he was trying to win in the court of public opinion. It was exactly the kind of move he'd make. All performance, no substance. "Thank you for the heads up," Clara said. "Keep me posted on any developments." After they hung up, Clara stood in her kitchen and allowed herself exactly 60 seconds of pure, undiluted anger. Adrien was calling her insane, claiming she was acting out of emotion rather than reason, trying to paint her as the hysterical wife who couldn't separate business from personal feelings. It was projection of the highest order, and they both knew it. 60 seconds passed. Clara took a breath, centered herself, and got back to work. By the time she arrived at the Hale Holdings office, Marcus had already assembled a response team. He met her at the elevator with coffee and a tablet full of news alerts. "It's bad," he said. "Every outlet is running with the temporary insanity angle. There are already opinion pieces debating whether you're fit to run a major corporation. The hashtag Hell Hath No Fury is trending." Clara took the coffee and the tablet. "Let them talk. Actions speak louder than hashtags." "The executive team is concerned. Some of them worked with Adrien for years. They're worried about instability, about how this looks to investors and clients. Then we show them stability, Clara said. We demonstrate that this company is stronger without Adrien than it ever was with him. Schedule the executive meeting for 9 instead of 11. I want to address their concerns head-on before the mayor meeting. The executive team consisted of 12 people, senior vice presidents overseeing development, finance, operations, marketing, and legal. Most of them had been with Cole Enterprises since its early days. Some had been hired by Adrien personally. All of them had just watched their former CEO get publicly destroyed by a woman they'd barely interacted with. Clara walked into the conference room at 9 sharp. 12 faces turned toward her with varying degrees of anxiety, skepticism, and curiosity. "Good morning," she said, taking her seat at the head of the table. "I'm sure you've all seen the news. I'm sure you have questions, so let's address this directly. Ask me anything." A moment of silence. Then Robert Chen, the VP of Development, spoke up. "Is it true? The injunction? Adrien's claiming you're not mentally fit to lead?" "Adrien is claiming I'm acting emotionally rather than strategically," Clara corrected. "It's a legal tactic with no merit. The injunction will be denied and will continue operating normally while it works through the courts." "But it raises questions," said Jennifer Walsh, VP of Marketing. "Our clients are calling, asking if the company is stable. Our investors want reassurance. How do we respond when our former CEO is publicly questioning your judgment?" Clara met her eyes. "You respond with facts. This company has been majority owned by Hale Holdings for 15 years. I've been chairman of Hale Holdings for 10 years. During that time, our portfolio has grown by 300%. Our development projects have maintained a 97% success rate, and our return on investment has consistently outperformed industry averages. Those aren't emotional decisions. Those are results." She looked around the table. Adrien Cole was an excellent frontman. He was charismatic, persuasive, and good at closing deals. But the strategy behind those deals? The capital that made them possible? The risk assessment that kept us from making catastrophic mistakes? That came from this office. That came from the team my father built, and I've continued to lead. Adrien's contribution was real, but it was never the whole story. "So what is the whole story?" asked Michael Torres, VP of Finance. "Because a lot of us believed we were working for Adrien's company. Finding out it was always yours. That changes the dynamic." "Does it?" Clara challenged. "Does it change the quality of the work you do? Does it change the projects you're managing or the goals you're pursuing? The only thing that's changed is who gets credit. And frankly, I've never cared about credit. I care about outcomes." Robert leaned forward. "What about the rebrand? Are we really changing the name?" "Yes. Over the next 6 months, Cole Enterprises will become Hale Developments. We'll phase out Adrien's name and replace it with the name that's actually been funding this work all along." "That's going to cost millions," Michael said. "Signage, marketing materials, legal filings, rebranding expenses." "I'm aware of the costs," Clara said. "I've approved the budget. It's worth it to have a name that reflects reality." Jennifer raised her hand slightly. "I have to ask, and I mean this respectfully, but is this about revenge? Because it looks like revenge. The firing, the rebrand, the public revelation. It looks like you're burning everything down because Adrien cheated." Clara had expected this question, had prepared for it, but hearing it still stung. "If this was about revenge," she said quietly, "I would have done it years ago. I've known about Adrien's affairs for a long time. Vanessa wasn't the first. She was just the most public." The room went very still. Clara could see shock registering on several faces. "I stayed," Clara continued, "because I believed in what we were building. I believed the work mattered more than the personal betrayal. And maybe I was naive, or maybe I was just conflict avoidant, but I convinced myself we could maintain a professional partnership even if the marriage was failing." She stood, walking to the window. "But last night at the gala, Adrien didn't just betray me personally. He damaged this company's reputation. He made a spectacle that reflected poorly on all of us. He gambled that he was too important to face consequences, and that's where he miscalculated." Clara turned back to face them. "This isn't revenge. This is accountability. If any of you had kissed someone inappropriately at a company event, in front of clients and partners and the media, you'd be fired too. Adrien doesn't get different rules just because he's the CEO, or was the CEO. Robert nodded slowly. Fair point. Here's what I need from all of you, Clara said. I need you to do your jobs. I need you to reassure your teams, your clients, your contacts that this company is stable and focused. I need you to deliver on your projects exactly as planned, and I need you to trust that I know what I'm doing. And if we can't? Asked David Park, VP of Operations. What if some of us aren't comfortable with this transition? Then you leave with a generous severance package. And my thanks for your service, Clara said simply. I won't hold anyone hostage, but if you stay, I expect loyalty and excellence. Those are non-negotiable. She sat back down. Now, let's talk about the Harbor Point project. I want to add affordable housing units to the development plan. Michael's eyebrows shot up. That'll cut our profit margin by at least 30%. I know. Do it anyway. Clara, with all due respect, that's exactly the kind of decision that's going to make investors nervous. Cutting profits right after a leadership upheaval. Michael, what's our current portfolio worth? He blinked at the question. Approximately $2.3 billion. And what's our annual revenue? Last year we did $470 million. And how much of that do we need to maintain operations, pay staff, and fund current projects? About $200 million, give or take. Clara leaned forward. So we have a portfolio worth billions, annual revenue in the hundreds of millions, and you're telling me we can't afford to reduce profit margins on one project to build something that actually helps this city? It's not about affording it. Then what's it about? Clara's voice sharpened. Because from where I'm sitting, this company has spent 15 years maximizing profit while minimizing impact. We've built luxury condos that sit empty half the year. We've developed commercial spaces that price out local businesses. We've turned Charleston into a playground for the wealthy, while people who actually live here struggle to find affordable housing. That ends now. Jennifer spoke carefully. Clara, I understand the impulse towards social responsibility. But dramatic policy shifts right now will be seen as emotional decision-making, which plays right into Adrien's narrative that you're acting irrationally. Let me be very clear, Clara said. I don't care about Adrien's narrative. I care about building a company my father would be proud of. And he didn't build Hale Holdings by chasing every dollar. He built it by investing in things that lasted, in communities, not just buildings, in people, not just profits. She looked around the table. If any of you think that's irrational, you're welcome to leave. But I'm not changing course because it's inconvenient or because it might feed gossip. We're doing this because it's right. A long silence fell over the room. Then Robert spoke. The affordable housing idea, how many units were you thinking? Clara felt something release in her chest. 20% of the development, mixed income integrated design, not segregated poor people units, real homes. That's bold, Robert said. Then he smiled. I like it. It'll be a pain to design and permit, but I like it. I can work with that, Michael said reluctantly. But I'll need to restructure the financing. Do it, Clara said. Jennifer, I need a PR strategy that positions this as visionary rather than reactive. Show people we're serious about sustainable development. On it. Clara stood. Thank you all. I know this transition isn't easy, but I believe we can build something better than what Adrien created. Something that lasts beyond headlines and quarterly reports. If you're willing to try, I'd be honored to have you on the team. One by one, they nodded. Some enthusiastically, some with reservation, but they nodded. As they filed out, Marcus approached. That was good. You turned them around. We'll see if it lasts, Clara said. What time is the mayor? 45 minutes. Car's waiting downstairs. The mayor's office occupied the top floor of City Hall, a historic building that had been the seat of Charleston's government for over a century. Mayor Harrison Richardson was in his second term, a pragmatic politician who'd maintained good relationships with the business community while pushing progressive policies. He'd also been at the Gala, had witnessed Adrien's display firsthand. His assistant showed Clara into his office at exactly 10 o'clock. Richardson stood to greet her, his expression carefully neutral. Mrs. Hale, he said, shaking her hand, thank you for making time. Mr. Mayor, though I think we can use first names at this point. Clara, then. He gestured to the seating area by his window. Can I offer you coffee? I'm caffeinated enough, thank you. They sat. Richardson studied her for a moment. I'll be honest. I've known you socially for years. Seen you at events, benefits, galas. I had no idea you were the power behind Cole Enterprises. That was intentional. Clearly. I have to ask, why? Why stay invisible when you owned the whole operation? Clara considered how much to share. Richardson was a politician, which meant anything she said could become public. But he was also smart enough to understand complex motivations. My father taught me that real power doesn't announce itself, she said. And for a long time, I believed staying in the background served the company's interests. Adrien was good at being the face. I was good at being the foundation. It worked. Until it didn't. Until he forgot which one of us actually owned what he was standing on. Richardson smiled slightly. The footage from that gala, I've watched it a dozen times. The look on your face when he kissed her. You weren't shocked. You weren't even surprised. I wasn't. You were waiting for something like that to happen. I was waiting for him to make a mistake big enough that I could act on it, Clara corrected. And he delivered. Richardson laughed, a short bark of genuine amusement. Remind me never to underestimate you again. His expression sobered. Which brings me to why I asked for this meeting. The waterfront development. Harbor Point. Adrien presented that project to the city council 6 months ago. We approved it based on his specifications: luxury retail, high-end residential, a boutique hotel. Now I'm hearing you want to change it? Significantly, Clara said. I want to add affordable housing, increase public space, and reduce the commercial footprint. That's going to require new permits, new approvals. The council isn't going to be happy about revisiting a project they already signed off on. I'm not asking them to be happy, Clara said. I'm asking them to be smart. Harrison, you and I both know this city has an affordable housing crisis. We also know that luxury developments like what Adrien proposed don't solve that problem. They make it worse. Agreed, but the council likes revenue. High-end retail brings in tax dollars. Luxury condos increase property values. Affordable housing does neither. Affordable housing creates stable communities, Clara countered. It keeps teachers, nurses, service workers, artists, all the people who make a city function from being priced out. And stable communities are what make a city worth investing in long term. Richardson leaned back in his chair. You're preaching to the choir, Clara, but I'm not the one you need to convince. The council is split. Half want growth at any cost. The other half want to preserve Charleston's character. Getting them to agree on anything is like herding cats. Then help me herd them, Clara said. Present this as a partnership. The city provides streamlined permitting and tax incentives for the affordable units. Hale Developments absorbs the reduced profit margin and delivers a mixed-use development that serves everyone. We both win. And if the council says no, then I build the affordable housing somewhere else, and your waterfront project sits in development hell while we argue over permits, Clara said bluntly. Because I'm not building another luxury playground, Harrison. Not anymore. He studied her. You've changed. Or maybe you haven't. Maybe this is who you always were, and we just couldn't see it. Both are true. Fair enough. He stood, walked to his window overlooking Charleston. I'll take it to the council, but I need something from you. Name it. Vanessa Drake worked on several city contracts over the past 2 years. If the fraud allegations are true, I need to know what city funds might have been involved. Clara hadn't expected that. You think she was charging personal expenses to city projects? I think she was sloppy and arrogant, and I want to make sure Charleston taxpayers weren't funding her affair with your husband. Richardson turned to face her. If there's exposure there, I need to get ahead of it. I'll have my team pull the records, Clara said. You'll have them by end of day. Thank you. He returned to his seat. One more thing. The press is having a field day with this story. Wronged wife, cheating husband, corporate intrigue. It's got everything except a car chase. How are you holding up? The question caught Clara off guard, not because it was inappropriate, but because it was genuine. Harrison Richardson was asking not as the mayor, but as someone who'd watched this drama unfold. I'm tired, she admitted, but I'm good. Better than I've been in a long time, actually. Because you're finally being yourself. Exactly. Richardson nodded. I get it. I spent years as a city councilman pretending to agree with people I couldn't stand, playing politics, being diplomatic. When I finally ran for mayor and got to set my own agenda, it was like breathing for the first time. Exhausting, but worth it. That's exactly what this feels like, Clara said. Then my advice? Stay exhausted. The moment you get comfortable is the moment you stop pushing forward. He stood, extending his hand. I'll talk to the council about Harbor Point. And Clara? Welcome to the visible world. It's going to be hell, but I think you'll handle it better than most. Clara shook his hand. Thank you, Harrison. That means a lot. As she left City Hall, Clara felt lighter somehow. One hurdle cleared, one ally secured. The day was beginning to look manageable. Then her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Clara Hale. Mrs. Hale, this is James Mitchell from Charleston First Bank. The voice was smooth, professional, with an undercurrent of tension. I'm calling regarding several accounts associated with Cole Enterprises and your personal holdings. Clara's stomach tightened. What about them? We've received notification from Adrien Cole's legal team claiming joint ownership of certain accounts. They're requesting a freeze on all transactions pending resolution of your divorce proceedings. Clara stopped walking. He's trying to freeze my accounts? Not your personal accounts, but the business accounts with his name on them, yes. We're legally obligated to review the request, but I wanted to reach out directly given the circumstances. Mr. Mitchell, Adrien Cole has never owned any portion of Hale Holdings or its subsidiary companies. His name appears on certain accounts because he was CEO of Cole Enterprises, but he has no ownership stake. The corporate documents make this clear. I understand, and that's what our review is showing. But until we complete due diligence, we have to freeze the disputed accounts. It's standard procedure. How long? 48 to 72 hours, typically. Clara closed her eyes, counted to 5. Mr. Mitchell, we have payroll running through one of those accounts. If you freeze it, 300 employees don't get paid on Friday. A pause. I wasn't aware of that. Now you are. I'll have my legal team send over the corporate documents proving sole ownership within the hour, but I need you to expedite this review. My employees shouldn't suffer because my ex-husband is playing games. I'll do what I can, Mrs. Hale. I'll prioritize the review personally. I appreciate that. After she hung up, Clara stood on the steps of City Hall, looking out at Charleston. Adrien was escalating, the injunction, the accounts, the public attacks. He was throwing everything at the wall to see what stuck. She pulled out her phone and called Marcus. Adrien's trying to freeze the business accounts, she said without preamble. Get Patricia on the line. I need corporate documents sent to Charleston First Bank within the hour, proving sole ownership of all Hale Holdings accounts. On it. Clara, there's something else. Of course there is. What now? Vanessa Drake just posted another statement. She's claiming you fabricated the fraud charges to punish her for the affair. Says she has documentation proving all her expenses were legitimate business costs. Clara almost laughed. She's bluffing. We have the receipts. I know. But she's making noise, and noise gets attention. Let her make noise. We'll respond with facts. Clara started walking toward her car. Schedule a meeting with legal. I want to review every piece of evidence we have against her. If she wants to fight this publicly, we'll bury her with documentation. Clara, are you sure? Engaging with her directly might look, I don't care how it looks, Clara cut him off. I care about protecting this company and the people who work here. Vanessa Drake stole from us. If she wants to pretend otherwise, we'll prove she's lying, publicly. She reached the car. Her driver opened the door, and Clara slid into the back seat. One more thing, Marcus said. Elizabeth Hartwell called the office 3 times. She says you're avoiding her. Clara sighed. Elizabeth, her oldest friend who'd been texting and calling nonstop since the gala, demanding the full story, asking if Clara was okay, offering support and sympathy Clara wasn't sure she wanted. Tell her I'll call her tonight. She won't believe that. Then tell her I'm buried in crisis management and I'll reach out when I have bandwidth. Which is true. Fine. But Clara, at some point you're going to have to let your friends in. You can't do all this alone. I'm not alone. I have you, Patricia, the whole team. You know what I mean. Clara did know. She knew she was avoiding the emotional conversations, the personal connections, the part of this mess that wasn't about business strategy and legal tactics. She knew she was hiding behind work the same way she'd hidden behind Adrien for years. Just a different kind of performance. But right now, work was all she could handle. The rest would have to wait. The legal meeting lasted 3 hours. Patricia and her team had assembled a comprehensive case against Vanessa Drake. Expense reports with personal charges, hotel stays on nights when no business travel was scheduled, restaurant bills from romantic dinners Adrien had later reimbursed from his personal account to cover the trail. "It's sloppy," Patricia said, spreading the documents across the conference table. Really, remarkably sloppy. She wasn't even trying to hide it. "She didn't think she'd get caught," Clara said, studying a receipt from a weekend getaway to Savannah. She thought being Adrien's girlfriend made her untouchable. "The total is actually higher than we initially reported," Patricia continued. 63,000 when we include everything. Vanessa's claiming it was all legitimate business expenses, but we have documentation showing no business activity on most of these dates. Can she fight the termination? She can try, but the evidence is overwhelming. And even if she could prove some expenses were legitimate, the sheer volume of questionable charges still constitutes a policy violation. Clara nodded. "Release a statement. Simple, factual." Vanessa Drake was terminated for expense report violations totaling over $60,000. We have documentation. We're prepared to defend our decision in court if necessary. "That's going to escalate things," Patricia warned. "Good. I want it escalated. I want everyone to know that Hale Holdings doesn't tolerate fraud, regardless of who you're sleeping with." Patricia made notes. "I'll draft something this afternoon." "And the account freeze?" "Documents are already on their way to the bank. I spoke with their legal department. They're expediting the review. We should have access restored by tomorrow morning. Make sure payroll goes through on time. I don't care if you have to hand-deliver checks. Our employees get paid." "Understood." Clara rubbed her temples. The headache that had been threatening all day was finally arriving in full force. "What else do I need to know?" Adrien's lawyer sent over divorce papers. Standard filing, citing irreconcilable differences. He's still pushing for a settlement negotiation. "Counter with our terms, no settlement. Standard divorce per the prenup. He gets what he brought into the marriage, which is nothing." "Done." "Clara, I have to ask, are you okay? You look exhausted." Clara looked at Patricia. This woman who'd been her father's attorney and was now hers, who'd watched Clara grow from a quiet young woman to whatever she was becoming now. "I'm running on spite and coffee," Clara said honestly. "But I'll make it through." Patricia smiled. "Spite is underrated as a motivator. Just make sure you're eating and sleeping too." "I'll try." After the meeting, Clara returned to her office to find Marcus waiting with her afternoon schedule and another stack of message slips. "The business reporter moved the interview to 5 instead of 4, he said. "Traffic accident on the bridge. And your mother called again. She's worried because you haven't returned her calls. I talked to her yesterday. She says that doesn't count because you were discussing business. She wants to know how you're doing emotionally." Clara sat down at her desk. "What did you tell her?" "That you're fine. She didn't believe me." "Smart woman." "Clara." Marcus sat across from her, his expression serious. "Take 30 minutes. Eat something real. Call your mother back. Step away from the crisis for half an hour. The company won't collapse." "You sound like Patricia." "Patricia's smart too. Come on. When's the last time you ate something that wasn't coffee or takeout eaten while working?" Clara tried to remember. Breakfast had been coffee. Lunch had been... Had there been lunch? "Point taken," she said. "Order something. We'll eat in here and go over tomorrow's schedule." "No." Marcus stood firm. "You're going to the break room. You're going to eat at a table like a human being, and you're not looking at a single spreadsheet while you do it." Clara stared at him. "When did you get so bossy?" "When my boss started working 18-hour days and forgetting she has a body that needs fuel. Move. Now." Despite everything, Clara laughed. "Fine, but you're joining me." "Deal." They ate in the break room, sandwiches Marcus had ordered from a deli down the street. Clara sat at the table by the window, looking out at Charleston, and tried to remember the last time she'd just sat and eaten a meal without multitasking. Months, maybe longer. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said. "Of course." "Why did you really stay with Adrien? You said you knew about other affairs. You had to know he was taking credit for your work. Why put up with it for so long?" Clara took a bite of her sandwich, considering. Honestly, I think I was scared. Scared of being alone, scared of what divorce would look like, scared of stepping out of the shadows and being visible. It was easier to let things continue than to blow everything up. And now? Now I'm still scared. Terrified, actually. But I'm more scared of going back to who I was, of shrinking myself again. She met his eyes. Does that make sense? Complete sense. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing, and I think you're handling it better than anyone expected. Including me? Especially you. Clara smiled. They finished eating in comfortable silence, and for those 30 minutes, Clara let herself just be. Not the wronged wife, not the hidden billionaire, not the woman orchestrating a corporate coup. Just Clara, eating a sandwich and watching the city she loved. Then her phone buzzed with a text from Elizabeth. I'm coming over tonight. Don't argue. I'm bringing wine, and you're going to talk to me like an actual friend. 7 p.m. Be there. Clara showed the message to Marcus. Apparently I don't have a choice. Good, he said. You need friends right now, not just employees. You're more than an employee. I know, but I'm still on the payroll. Elizabeth isn't. Let her help. The interview with the business reporter went smoothly. Laura Chen from the Charleston Business Journal asked pointed questions about the transition, the rebrand, Clara's vision for the company's future. Clara answered honestly. This was about building something sustainable, something meaningful, something that served the community rather than just extracting wealth from it. Do you regret staying invisible for so long? Laura asked near the end. Clara thought about it. I regret not trusting myself sooner. I regret thinking I needed to stay small to make my marriage work. But I don't regret the work itself. Everything I learned in those years, all the strategic thinking and careful planning, that's what made this transition possible. What would you say to women in similar situations? Women who feel invisible in their own lives? I'd say visibility is a choice, and it's never too late to choose it. But be ready, because once people can see you, they're going to have opinions, and not all of them will be kind. Laura smiled. Speaking from recent experience? Very recent experience. When Clara finally left the office at 6:30, she was exhausted to her bones. But she drove home, changed into comfortable clothes, and was waiting when Elizabeth arrived at 7 with 2 bottles of wine and a determined expression. Okay, Elizabeth said, setting the wine on the counter and pulling Clara into a fierce hug. We're going to drink, and you're going to tell me everything, and I mean everything, starting with how you've been a secret billionaire this entire time, and I had no idea. Clara hugged her back, feeling emotion rise in her throat. It's a long story. Good thing we have wine. They sat on the terrace as the sun set over Charleston, and Clara told her oldest friend the whole truth, about her father's company, about the decision to let Adrien be the face, about the years of growing smaller while he grew larger, about the affairs she'd known about and ignored, about the moment at the gala when she'd finally had enough. Elizabeth listened without interrupting, her expression cycling through shock, anger, sympathy, and finally something like pride. You magnificent, sneaky genius, she said when Clara finished. You let him think he owned an empire while you actually owned it. Clara, that's brilliant. It didn't feel brilliant at the time. It felt cowardly. It wasn't cowardly. It was strategic. There's a difference. Elizabeth poured them both more wine. And now? How are you really doing? Not the professional answer you give reporters. The real answer. Clara looked out at the garden, at the roses that still needed trimming, at the life she was rebuilding from scratch. I'm tired, she said quietly, and scared and angry and relieved, and about a dozen other things I don't have names for yet. That sounds about right for blowing up your entire life in 48 hours. It's only been 48 hours? Clara shook her head. It feels like a year. Because you're living about 10 years worth of change in a few days. Give yourself credit, Clara. Most people would have collapsed by now. You're still standing. Barely. Barely is still standing. Elizabeth raised her glass. To barely standing, and to the invisible queen who finally claimed her throne. They clinked glasses, and Clara felt something loosen in her chest. For the first time since the gala, she let herself cry. Not from sadness exactly, but from release, from letting go of a version of herself she'd outgrown long ago. Elizabeth held her hand and didn't say anything, because there was nothing to say. Sometimes the only response to transformation was witness. Later, after Elizabeth left and Clara was alone in the house again, she stood in her bedroom and looked at the space where Adrien's things used to be. Tomorrow, she'd start making this place feel like hers again. New paint, new furniture, new everything. A fresh start in a space that had never really been shared. Her phone buzzed one last time. A text from Marcus. Just saw tomorrow's headlines. You're officially Charleston's most talked about person. How does it feel to be visible? Clara typed back. Terrifying and necessary. See you at 7. She set the phone down, turned off the lights, and climbed into bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. More legal battles, more public scrutiny, more people picking apart every decision she made. But tonight, Clara Hale slept in her own house, in her own bed, in her own skin. And that was enough. 3 weeks passed like a storm, and then suddenly the chaos began to settle into something resembling normal. The injunction was denied, just as Patricia predicted. The bank accounts were unfrozen within 48 hours, and the rebrand from Cole Enterprises to Hale Developments moved forward with the efficiency of a machine that had been waiting years to activate. Clara stood in front of the first building to receive its new signage, the downtown tower that had been Cole's flagship property. Workers were removing the massive letters spelling Cole Enterprises from the facade, replacing them with sleek bronze lettering that read Hale Developments. It's surreal, Marcus said beside her. Seeing it actually happen. It's overdue, Clara corrected, but she understood what he meant. For 15 years, Adrien's name had dominated Charleston's skyline. Now it was being erased, letter by letter, and replaced with the truth that had always existed beneath the surface. Her phone rang. Patricia. Tell me something good, Clara said. The divorce papers are finalized. Adrien signed this morning. No settlement, no negotiation. He's taking what the prenup stipulates, which is exactly what we offered. Nothing. Clara felt something settle in her chest. Just like that? His lawyer finally made him understand he had no leverage. The contract was airtight, the prenup was clear, and fighting it would only cost him money he doesn't have anymore. Patricia paused. Clara, he's broke. Whatever savings he had, he's been burning through trying to maintain his lifestyle. The house he's renting, the car he's leasing, the legal fees, he's running on fumes. Clara should have felt satisfaction, maybe even vindication. Instead, she felt something closer to pity. Adrien had built his entire identity on wealth and status that had never actually belonged to him. Now he had neither. What about Vanessa? Clara asked. She's still fighting the termination, but her case is falling apart. We released the documentation yesterday, all $63,000 in fraudulent expenses, complete with receipts and dates. The media ran with it. She's trying to claim it was a misunderstanding, but nobody's buying it. Good. Anything else? The Forbes profile comes out tomorrow. I got an advance copy. It's actually quite flattering. They're calling you the strategic genius behind Charleston's biggest empire. There's a whole section analyzing your investment patterns over the past decade. How did they get that information? Public records mostly, corporate filings, real estate transactions, SEC documents. Everything was already there. People just weren't paying attention. After they hung up, Clara turned back to the building. The last letter of Cole was being lifted away by crane, leaving just empty space waiting for Hale. You okay? Marcus asked. I keep waiting to feel something, Clara admitted. Triumph, maybe, or satisfaction, but mostly I just feel tired. That's because you've been working 18-hour days for 3 weeks straight. You're running on nothing but determination and expensive coffee. The coffee isn't that expensive. Clara, you had me order beans from a specialty roaster in Seattle that cost $40 a bag. It's good coffee, Marcus laughed. You're impossible. Come on, let's get you back to the office. You have the city council presentation in 2 hours, and you need to eat something first. The city council meeting was held in the same chambers where Adrien had presented the original Harbor Point proposal 6 months earlier. Clara had watched that presentation from the back of the room, listening to Adrien describe luxury retail spaces and high-end condos with the easy confidence of someone who'd never worried about where his next rent check would come from. Now she stood at the same podium, facing the same council members, presenting a very different vision. Members of the council, she began, pulling up the first slide of her presentation. I'm here today to discuss a revised proposal for the Harbor Point development. As you know, Hale Developments recently assumed full control of this project. After careful review, we've identified significant opportunities to increase community impact while maintaining economic viability. She clicked to the next slide, showing architectural renderings of the new design. Gone were the glass towers of luxury condos. In their place, a mixed-use development with accessible price points, integrated public spaces, and a focus on sustainability. The revised proposal includes 200 residential units, 40% of which will be designated as affordable housing using a mixed-income model. This means affordable units won't be segregated or distinguishable from market-rate units. They'll be integrated throughout the development. Councilwoman Janet Rodriguez, who'd been skeptical of the original proposal, leaned forward. 40% affordable? That's significantly higher than the city requires. It is, Clara confirmed. We believe it's also what Charleston needs. The city's median income hasn't kept pace with housing costs. Teachers, nurses, service workers, the people who keep the city functioning, are being priced out of the neighborhoods they serve. This development addresses that. Councilman Robert Hayes, who'd championed Adrien's original luxury proposal, looked less impressed. Mrs. Hale, with all respect, the original proposal generated an estimated $15 million in annual tax revenue. This revised plan cuts that by at least 30%. How do you justify asking the city to accept less revenue? By asking the city to consider what that revenue actually costs, Clara said. Luxury developments that price out existing residents create hidden costs. Longer commutes, increased traffic, strain on social services in areas where displaced residents relocate. When you factor in those costs, the revenue advantage disappears. She pulled up another slide, showing data Marcus's team had compiled. These numbers show the long-term economic impact of mixed income versus luxury-only developments. Mixed income creates more stable property values, reduces displacement, and generates consistent tax revenue. Luxury developments create short-term spikes followed by stagnation as prices outpace local earning capacity. These are projections, Hayes countered, not proven outcomes. They're projections based on comparable developments in similar markets, Clara corrected. Charleston isn't unique. Other cities have tried the luxury-only approach. It doesn't work long-term. It creates wealth for developers and displacement for residents. Rodriguez spoke up again. Mrs. Hale, I appreciate this approach. But I have to ask, why the change? Your company, under Mr. Cole's leadership, was perfectly happy to pursue luxury-only development. What changed? Clara met her eyes. Leadership changed. Vision changed. Priorities changed. My father didn't build Hale Holdings by extracting maximum profit from every project. He built it by investing in communities, in sustainable growth, in things that lasted. Under Adrien Cole, this company lost sight of that. I'm bringing it back. So this is about legacy, but? Hayes asked, his tone skeptical. Rebuilding your father's vision? It's about responsibility, Clara said firmly. Hale Holdings owns significant property in Charleston. We have influence over how this city develops. We can use that influence to build luxury towers that sit empty half the year, or we can build communities where people actually live. I choose the latter. Mayor Richardson, who'd been quietly observing, finally spoke. The revised proposal includes requests for expedited permitting and tax incentives on the affordable units. Can you walk us through those asks? Clara pulled up the next slide. We're requesting a streamlined approval process that would reduce the typical 18-month permitting timeline to 9 months. This saves us money, which we can redirect into the development itself. In exchange, we're committing to higher sustainability standards than city code requires. LEED Gold certification minimum, solar installation, rainwater management, the full package. And the tax incentives? 10-year property tax reduction on affordable units, consistent with existing state programs for affordable housing development. This makes the reduced profit margin sustainable long-term. Richardson looked at his counsel. Questions? Rodriguez raised her hand. I move to approve the revised proposal pending standard environmental and engineering review. Second, said Councilman Michael Park. Hayes leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. I have concerns about setting a precedent here. If we approve this, every developer will come asking for the same incentives. Good, Clara said. If every developer in Charleston starts building mixed-income housing instead of luxury only, that's exactly what this city needs. That's not how business works, Mrs. Hale. It's how my business works, Councilman Hayes. And unless the city has alternative proposals for addressing the affordable housing crisis, I'd suggest you consider supporting this one. The room went quiet. Clara could feel the tension, could see Hayes bristle at being challenged publicly, but she was done being diplomatic, done performing deference to men who confuse profit margins with vision. Richardson cleared his throat. All in favor of approving the revised Harbor Point proposal pending standard review? 6 hands rose out of 9 council members. Hayes and 2 of his allies abstained, but it didn't matter. The motion carried. Motion passes, Richardson announced. Mrs. Hale, we'll have the approval documents ready by end of week. Thank you for your presentation. Clara gathered her materials. As she stepped away from the podium, Rodriguez approached. That was impressive, the councilwoman said quietly. Watching you shut down Hayes's objections. Very impressive. He had legitimate concerns, Clara said diplomatically. He had profit concerns. You had community concerns. There's a difference. Rodriguez extended her hand. I look forward to seeing this project move forward. Charleston needs more developers who think like you do. Outside the council chambers, Marcus was waiting with an enormous grin. You destroyed Hayes. Did you see his face when you said developers should build for communities instead of profit? I saw. I also saw the mayor give me a warning look. I shouldn't have been that direct. Screw diplomatic. You were right and you said it. That's what leadership looks like. Clara's phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Divorce is final. Judge signed off this morning. You're officially single. She stared at the message. 12 years of marriage dissolved with a signature. No ceremony, no witnesses, just a legal document that said what they'd both known for months. It was over. You okay? Marcus asked, reading her expression. I'm divorced, Clara said. The word felt strange in her mouth. As of about an hour ago, apparently. How do you feel? Clara considered. How did she feel? Not sad, exactly. Not relieved, either. More like she'd closed a book she'd been reading for too long, one where she already knew the ending. I feel like I can breathe, she said finally. That evening, Clara did something she hadn't done in years. She went home at 5:30. No evening meetings, no working dinners, no emails that couldn't wait until morning. She drove home, changed into jeans and a t-shirt, and went out to the garden with pruning shears. The roses had needed attention for months. Now she gave it to them, cutting away dead growth, shaping the bushes, clearing space for new blooms. It was physical work, mindless work, the kind that let her brain finally quiet down. She was wrist-deep in a particularly stubborn bush when her phone rang. Her mother. I heard about the divorce, Catherine Hale said. Are you all right? I'm fine, Mom. Actually, I'm in the garden pruning roses. You're gardening? Voluntarily? Clara laughed. Is that so shocking? Sweetheart, you haven't touched the garden in 10 years. You always said you didn't have time. I'm making time. Her mother's voice softened. Good. That's good, Clara. You need moments like this. Quiet moments. Everything else, the business, the divorce, the publicity, it's all noise. But this is real. They talked for a while about nothing important. Garden plans, her mother's book club, a recipe Catherine wanted to try, normal conversation between mother and daughter without crisis or urgency. When they hung up, Clara sat on the garden bench and looked at her work. The roses looked better already, healthier, with room to grow. She'd neglected them because she'd been too busy performing the role of Adrien's wife, attending his events, supporting his career, maintaining the facade. Now the facade was gone, and the roses could breathe. Clara's phone buzzed again. This time, a news alert. Vanessa Drake files defamation suit against Hale Developments. She opened the article. Vanessa was suing for $50 million, claiming the fraud allegations were false and had destroyed her career and reputation. Her lawyer was quoted saying they had evidence proving all expenses were legitimate business costs. Clara forwarded the article to Patricia with a single word. Thoughts? Patricia's response came within minutes. She's desperate. We have receipts for everything. This won't go anywhere. Let her waste her money on legal fees. That night, Clara had dinner on the terrace, grilled salmon and asparagus that she actually cooked herself, a bottle of white wine she didn't have to share. She sat and ate slowly, watching the sunset, letting herself exist in the moment instead of constantly planning the next move. Her phone stayed inside. Her laptop stayed closed. For 2 hours, Clara Hale was just a woman eating dinner in her garden. Not a CEO or a divorcee or a media sensation, just herself. The next morning, the Forbes profile hit newsstands. Marcus brought a copy to her office at 7 a.m., grinning like a kid on Christmas. Page 43, he said, dropping the magazine on her desk. Full spread, amazing photo, and they absolutely nail who you are. Clara picked up the magazine. The photo showed her in her office, standing by the window with Charleston's skyline behind her. She looked powerful, composed, exactly like someone who owned half the buildings in the frame. The headline read, Clara Hale, the strategic genius who built an empire in the shadows. She read the article slowly. It detailed her father's company, her role in building Hale Holdings, the strategic decisions that had grown the portfolio by 300%. It analyzed her investment patterns, her approach to risk management, her focus on sustainable long-term growth over short-term profit. And it didn't shy away from the drama. The article covered Adrien's affair, the termination, the divorce. But it framed them as Clara reclaiming power that had always been hers, not as revenge or emotional reaction. In an industry dominated by ego and spectacle, the article concluded, Clara Hale represents something different: strategic patience, long-term vision, and the understanding that real power doesn't need constant validation. She built an empire while the world wasn't watching. Now that they're watching, she's showing them what real leadership looks like. Clara set the magazine down. Well, I guess I'm officially visible now. You're officially an icon, Marcus corrected. My phone's been ringing since 6 a.m. Interview requests, speaking invitations, investment firms wanting meetings. Everybody wants a piece of the strategic genius. Tell them no. I don't have time for a speaking tour. I already did. But Clara, you should consider doing some of these. Not all of them, but some. You have a platform now. You could use it. For what? For whatever you want. Policy advocacy, industry reform, mentoring other women. You're not just a CEO anymore. You're a symbol. Clara made a face. I don't want to be a symbol. I just want to run my company. Too late. You already are one. Might as well use it strategically. Over the next week, Clara settled into a new rhythm. She still worked long hours, but she built in breaks. Lunch away from her desk, evening walks, time in the garden. She accepted 2 speaking invitations, both at universities where she could talk to young women about business strategy and the long game of building power. And slowly, piece by piece, she began rebuilding not just her company, but her life. The house underwent renovations. The master bedroom was repainted, the furniture replaced, every trace of Adrien removed. Clara converted his home office into a reading room, lined with bookshelves and a comfortable chair by the window. She started having friends over again, Elizabeth and a few other women she'd lost touch with during her marriage. They drank wine and talked about everything except business. It felt strange at first, then necessary, then finally natural. 2 months after the gala, Clara walked into her office to find Marcus waiting with an unusual expression, half amusement, half something else. What? She asked. You have a visitor. I put him in conference room 3. Who? Adrien. Clara's hand froze on her coffee cup. Adrien is here? Why? He says he needs to talk to you, says it's important. Marcus hesitated. He looks rough, Clara. Really rough. Clara set down her coffee. How rough? Like someone who's been losing sleep and money in equal measure. She considered sending him away. She had no obligation to see him, no reason to subject herself to whatever he wanted to say. But curiosity got the better of her. 5 minutes, she said. That's all he gets. Conference room 3 had windows overlooking the harbor. Adrien stood with his back to the door, staring out at the water. When he turned at the sound of her entrance, Clara barely recognized him. Marcus had been right. Adrien looked terrible. His suit was off the rack instead of custom, his hair needed cutting, and there were dark circles under his eyes that no amount of sleep could fix. This was a man who'd lost not just his empire, but his sense of self. Clara, he said, thank you for seeing me. You have 5 minutes. Use them wisely. He flinched at her tone. I deserve that. I deserve a lot worse, actually. Adrien, why are you here? He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture she'd seen 1,000 times. I need help. I'm broke, Clara. Completely broke. The legal fees, the lifestyle I couldn't give up, the mistakes I kept making, it's gone. All of it. And you're telling me this because? Because I was hoping... He stopped, seemed to gather courage. I was hoping you might consider a loan, just enough to get back on my feet. I can pay it back once I rebuild. Clara stared at him. You want me to give you money? A loan, not a gift. I'd sign whatever terms you wanted. I just need a bridge to... No. Clara, please, I know I don't deserve your help. I know I treated you terribly. But we had 12 years together. That has to count for something. It counted for something, Clara said quietly. It counted for me learning what I'm worth, what I won't accept, what I refuse to tolerate ever again. And part of that learning means not rescuing people from consequences they created. I'm not asking for rescue. I'm asking for a chance. You had chances, Adrien. Hundreds of them. You had the chance to treat me like a partner instead of an accessory. You had the chance to acknowledge my contributions instead of claiming sole credit. You had the chance to be faithful, or at least discreet. You squandered every single one. Adrien's face crumpled. I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But I'm trying to do better. I'm trying to rebuild my life. Then rebuild it, Clara said. But not with my money. Not with my help. You want to rebuild? Start where I started, with nothing but your own effort and intelligence. See how far that takes you. You're really going to let me fail? I'm going to let you succeed or fail on your own merit. That's what you always claimed you wanted, wasn't it? To be self-made? She walked to the door, then paused. Adrien, you were never as talented as you thought you were, but you weren't as useless as you're acting now either. You were good at sales, good with people, good at closing deals. Use those skills. Find work that matches your actual abilities instead of your inflated sense of importance. You might surprise yourself. Clara, 5 minutes are up. Marcus will show you out. She left him standing in the conference room and returned to her office. Her hands were shaking slightly, not from fear or sadness, but from the sheer relief of saying no, of refusing to be the safety net for someone who'd never appreciated having her beneath them. Marcus appeared in her doorway. He's gone. You okay? I'm perfect, Clara said, and meant it. That afternoon, Clara received an unexpected call. The number showed as Charleston First Bank, James Mitchell. Mrs. Hale, Mitchell said when she answered. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. That depends on what you're calling about. I wanted to give you a heads up about something. Adrien Cole came into the bank this morning trying to open an account. During the application process, he listed you as a reference for creditworthiness. Clara closed her eyes. Of course he did. We declined to contact you, obviously, and given his current financial situation, we declined his application as well, but I thought you should know he's using your name. Thank you for telling me, Mr. Mitchell, and thank you for not contacting me about it. Of course. There's one other thing. He mentioned he was looking for work, said something about sales positions, account management, that kind of thing. Do you know if he's reached out to any of your business contacts? Not that I'm aware of, but if he does, I'd appreciate you letting me know. After they hung up, Clara sat at her desk and let herself imagine it. Adrien, once the celebrated CEO of a billion-dollar company, now applying for entry-level sales positions. Using her name as a reference because he had no other credibility left. Part of her felt sorry for him. A small part, buried deep. But mostly, she felt free. 3 months after the gala, Clara stood in front of Harbor Point's construction site. The foundation was being poured, the first tangible evidence that her vision was becoming reality. In 18 months, there would be 200 homes here, affordable, beautiful, integrated into the community instead of towering above it. Marcus stood beside her, reviewing timeline updates on his tablet. We're ahead of schedule. If this keeps up, we'll have residents moving in 6 weeks early. Good. What's next on the agenda? You have that nonprofit board meeting at 3. The education foundation that asked you to join? Clara had been invited to join the boards of half a dozen organizations in the past few months. She'd accepted three: education, affordable housing advocacy, and environmental sustainability. All causes her father would have supported, all opportunities to use her platform for more than just business. I'll be there. Anything else? Dinner with your mother at 7. She made me promise to remind you. Consider me reminded. As they walked back to the car, Clara's phone buzzed with a news alert. She almost ignored it, then saw the headline: Vanessa Drake drops defamation lawsuit against Hale Developments. She opened the article. Vanessa had quietly withdrawn her suit, citing desire to move forward and focus on new opportunities. No admission of wrongdoing, but no settlement either. She'd simply given up. Vanessa dropped the lawsuit, Clara told Marcus. About time. How much do you think it cost her in legal fees? More than she could afford, clearly. That evening, over dinner with her mother, Clara found herself talking about the future instead of the past. About the Harbor Point project, about the nonprofit work, about the possibility of expanding Hale Developments into other cities. You sound happy, her mother observed. Actually happy, not just professionally satisfied. Clara considered. I am. For the first time in years, I actually am. Your father would be so proud of you, sweetheart. Not just for the business success, but for standing up for yourself. For choosing yourself. I should have done it sooner. Maybe. Or maybe it happened exactly when it needed to. Sometimes we need to be ready for our own revolution. Later that night, alone in her house that finally felt like home, Clara poured herself a glass of wine and sat in her reading room. On the shelf was the Forbes issue with her profile, the first public acknowledgement of who she'd always been. But more important than any article or accolade was the quiet knowledge that she'd rebuilt her life on her own terms. Not as someone's wife, not as someone's secret weapon, but as herself. The queen didn't need her throne to prove she was powerful. She'd always had the power. She just finally had the courage to use it. And that, Clara thought as she opened her book, was worth more than any empire. 6 months after the gala, Charleston woke to the first snow of winter. It was rare for the city, a light dusting that turned the historic streets into something out of a postcard. Clara stood at her office window, watching the flakes drift past, coffee warming her hands, thinking about how much had changed since that night when Adrien had kissed Vanessa in front of 300 witnesses. The intercom on her desk buzzed. Marcus. Clara, you have a visitor. No appointment, but he says it's important. Who is it? A pause. Adrien. Clara's first instinct was to say no. She'd seen him once since that day in the conference room, passing on the street near the courthouse where their divorce had been finalized. He'd looked away. She'd kept walking. That had felt like closure enough. Did he say what he wants? No, just that he needs 5 minutes. He looks different, Clara. Better, I think. But different. Curiosity won again. Send him to conference room 3. I'll be there in a minute. She took her time finishing her coffee, reviewing her mental calendar for the day. Meeting with the Harbor Point construction team at 10. Lunch with the Education Foundation board at noon. Interview with a documentary crew doing a piece on women in real estate at 3. Dinner with Elizabeth and her mother at 7. A full life, a purposeful life. A life that didn't need Adrien Cole in it, but she could spare 5 minutes to hear whatever he'd come to say. When Clara entered the conference room, Adrien stood by the window looking out at the snow. He turned at the sound of the door, and Marcus had been right. He looked different. Not better in the way he used to define it, with expensive clothes and carefully styled hair. Better in a way that was harder to define, more present somehow, more real. He wore khakis and a simple button-down shirt, clothes that looked like they came from a department store rather than a tailor. His hair was shorter, graying at the temples, and his face carried lines that hadn't been there 6 months ago, the kind that came from genuine struggle rather than performative stress. Clara, he said, thank you for seeing me. I know you didn't have to. You have 5 minutes, Adrien, just like last time. I remember. He didn't sit, didn't try to make himself comfortable. I'm not here to ask for money or favors or anything else. I'm here to apologize. Clara leaned against the conference table, arms crossed. Go on. 6 months ago, I came here desperate and entitled, expecting you to rescue me from consequences I created. You said no. You told me to rebuild on my own merit. He met her eyes. You were right. About everything. About me taking credit for your work, about me never appreciating what you contributed, about me believing my own mythology. All of it. I know I was right, Clara said quietly. What I don't know is why you're here telling me this now. Because I owe you the truth. Not the version I told myself for 12 years, but the actual truth. Adrien walked to the table, stayed standing on the opposite side. I was afraid of you, Clara. From the very beginning, you were smarter than me, more strategic, better at everything that actually mattered in business. And instead of appreciating that, instead of being grateful for a partner who could make me better, I spent 12 years trying to diminish you so I could feel adequate. Clara had imagined this conversation dozens of times over the years. In her fantasies, Adrien would apologize and she'd feel vindicated, triumphant, powerful. Instead, she just felt tired. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because you deserve to hear it, and because I'm trying to be honest with myself for the first time in my life. And that means being honest with you. He paused. I got a job, Clara. Sales manager at a commercial real estate firm. It's entry level, nothing glamorous. I cold call clients and manage accounts and report to people who used to report to me. And I'm good at it. Not brilliant, not revolutionary, just competent. And for the first time in my life, I'm okay with being just competent. I'm glad you found work, Clara said, and meant it, truly. I saw the Harbor Point groundbreaking in the news, the affordable housing project. It's brilliant, Clara. It's everything I should have been doing instead of chasing profit margins and ego. It's what this city needs. I know, I should have seen that when I was running the company, but I was too busy performing success to actually achieve anything meaningful. Adrien's voice cracked slightly. I'm sorry, Clara, for all of it. For the affairs, for the credit stealing, for making myself big by making you small, for that night at the gala, for every single day of our marriage where I chose my ego over your dignity. Clara felt emotion rise in her throat. This was the apology she'd needed 12 years ago, or 5 years ago, or even 6 months ago. Now it felt simultaneously too late and perfectly timed. Thank you, she said. I appreciate you saying that. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything, actually. I just wanted you to know that you were right about me, and I'm trying to be better. Then be better, Adrien. Not for me, for yourself. He nodded, started toward the door, then paused. One more thing. Vanessa reached out to me last month. She wanted to get back together. Said we could rebuild what we had. I told her no. Why? Because what we had was built on lies and stolen money and mutual delusion. I'm done with that. He smiled without humor. Besides, she only wanted me when she thought I had power. Once that was gone, so was her interest. I was just slow to realize it. She's working now, I heard. Receptionist somewhere? Dental office in North Charleston. Makes about 1/10 of what she used to earn. Adrien shrugged. We both got what we deserved, I think. The difference is I'm trying to learn from it. After he left, Clara sat in the conference room for a long time, watching the snow fall. She felt strange, not happy exactly, not sad either. More like a chapter had finally, truly closed. Adrien had apologized. She'd accepted. They would both move forward with their separate lives. It was enough. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Construction crew is here early, ready when you are. Clara stood, straightened her suit jacket, and headed downstairs. The Harbor Point construction site had transformed over the past 6 months. What had been an empty waterfront lot was now a forest of steel beams and concrete foundations, the skeleton of the community Clara had envisioned. Workers in hard hats moved with purpose, welding, hammering, building something that would last. Robert Chen, the VP of Development who'd been skeptical at first, now greeted Clara with genuine enthusiasm. We're ahead of schedule and under budget. The mixed income design is actually saving us money on certain materials because we can order in bulk. That's excellent news, Clara said. What about the community feedback? Overwhelmingly positive. We've had 300 applications for the affordable units already, and we won't be ready for tenants for another year. People are hungry for this kind of housing. Clara walked through the site with Robert, reviewing plans and timelines. The design was beautiful, modern but warm, with green spaces and community areas woven throughout. It would be a place where teachers could afford to live near their schools, where nurses could walk to the hospital, where families could build lives without being crushed by rent. It was exactly what her father would have built, what he'd taught her to value above quarterly profits and shareholder returns. "Clara," Robert said as they reached the waterfront edge of the property, "I want to thank you for pushing this vision. When you first proposed it, I thought it was idealistic, naive even. But watching it come together, seeing how the community has responded, I realize it's not idealism. It's just good business done right." "That's all I ever wanted," Clara said. "Good business done right." That afternoon, the documentary crew arrived at Hale Developments to interview Clara for their series on women breaking barriers in male-dominated industries. The director, a sharp woman named Sarah Martinez, had Clara sit in her father's old chair, the camera positioned to capture both her and the Charleston skyline through the window behind her. "Let's start with the obvious question," Sarah said. "You ran a multi-billion-dollar company in secret for over a decade. Why stay hidden?" Clara had answered this question a dozen times in the past 6 months, but she tried to make each answer honest. "I thought I was being strategic, letting my husband be the face while I controlled the foundation. But if I'm being completely honest, I was also hiding from scrutiny, from judgment, from the possibility of failure. It felt safer to be invisible. And now? Now I know that safety isn't the same as power. Real power means being willing to be visible, to be criticized, to stand behind your decisions publicly. I gave up years of my life trying to be safe. I'm done with that." Sarah leaned forward. "The night of the gala, when your husband kissed his mistress in front of everyone, what went through your mind in that moment?" Clara smiled slightly. "Relief. I know that sounds strange, but it was relief. He'd finally done something public enough that I could act on it. For years, I'd known about the affairs, the credit stealing, the condescension, but I'd convinced myself it wasn't worth blowing up my life over. That night, he made it impossible for me to keep pretending. Some critics have called your response vindictive, that you destroyed your husband's career out of revenge. Those critics don't understand the difference between revenge and accountability," Clara said firmly. "Revenge would have been making him suffer just to watch him hurt. Accountability was enforcing the contract he signed, protecting the company from reputational damage, and reclaiming what had always belonged to me. If that's vindictive, then every CEO who fires an underperforming employee is vindictive." "Fair point. What do you want your legacy to be? Not as the woman who took down her cheating husband, but as a business leader?" Clara considered. "I want to be remembered as someone who proved you can build wealth without extracting it from communities. Someone who showed that sustainable development and social responsibility aren't incompatible with profitability. They're actually essential to it. And maybe, if I'm lucky, someone who helped other women realize they don't have to hide their power to be palatable." Sarah smiled. "I think you're well on your way to all three." After the interview, Clara returned to her office to find an unexpected package waiting on her desk. No return address, just her name written in familiar handwriting. She opened it carefully. Inside was a leather-bound journal and a handwritten note. The note was from Adrien. "Clara, this journal belonged to your father. He gave it to me when we got married, told me to use it to document our journey building the company together. I never wrote in it. I was too busy performing instead of reflecting. I should have given this back years ago. It was never really mine. I hope you fill it with the achievements he would have been proud of. I have no doubt you will. Adrien." Clara opened the journal. The first page had her father's handwriting. "To Adrien and Clara, as you build something that lasts, may you always remember that the foundation matters more than the facade." She ran her fingers over his words, feeling the familiar ache of missing him. He'd died believing she and Adrien were building something together. He'd never known how one-sided that partnership had been, but he'd given her the tools to fix it. The business acumen, the strategic thinking, the understanding that real value wasn't measured in headlines or awards. All of that had been his legacy, and she'd used it to reclaim what should have always been acknowledged as hers. Clara picked up a pen and wrote on the first blank page, "Year 1 of building it right." Then she started documenting everything: the Harbor Point project, the affordable housing initiative, the policy advocacy work, the nonprofit partnerships. Not for publicity or recognition, but for the record, for the future, for the next generation of builders who would come after her. The holidays came and went. Clara spent Thanksgiving with her mother and Elizabeth's family, Christmas at a charity event for homeless families, New Year's Eve alone in her reading room with a good book and better wine. She dated occasionally, a few dinners with interesting men, one brief relationship that ended amicably when they both realized they were better as friends. Clara wasn't in a hurry. She'd spent 12 years in the wrong partnership. She was content to wait for the right one, or to build a fulfilling life alone. Either option felt like freedom. In February, Harbor Point held its ribbon-cutting ceremony. Mayor Richardson gave a speech about vision and community investment. Councilwoman Rodriguez praised Hale Developments for setting a new standard. And Clara stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd of future residents, city officials, and construction workers who'd built this dream into reality. My father used to say that buildings are just steel and concrete until people make them homes, Clara said. Harbor Point isn't about the architecture or the awards or the profit margins. It's about the teacher who can now afford to live in the neighborhood where she works, the nurse who can walk to the hospital instead of commuting 2 hours, the family who can save money and build equity and create stability. That's what makes a building matter, not the name on the facade, but the lives inside it. The crowd applauded. Clara cut the ribbon, and the first residents began moving into their new homes. That evening, Clara stood on her terrace watching the sunset paint Charleston in shades of gold and pink. The city she loved, the city 4 generations of her family had invested in, the city she was finally shaping openly instead of from the shadows. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Clara Hale. Mrs. Hale. This is Jennifer from Carolina Catering Supply. I have a Mr. Cole here requesting to speak with someone in purchasing about our premium line. Clara's heart stopped. I'm sorry, what? Mr. Cole? He says he's a sales representative and he has an appointment to discuss catering equipment for your corporate events? For a moment, Clara couldn't process what she was hearing. Then it clicked. Adrien was cold calling businesses, trying to sell catering supplies, and he'd somehow ended up calling Hale Developments. The man who'd once commanded a billion-dollar empire was now trying to sell her napkins and serving trays. Clara felt a wave of emotions, pity, vindication, sadness, and something that might have been respect. He was doing what she'd told him to do 6 months ago, rebuilding on his own merit, using his actual skills, working his way up from the bottom. Mrs. Hale? Jennifer asked. Should I transfer him to purchasing? Clara had a choice. She could take the call, could subject Adrien to the humiliation of pitching his former wife on catering supplies, could remind him exactly how far he'd fallen, or she could let him do his job without that particular degradation. No, Clara said quietly. Please tell Mr. Cole that we've recently committed to our catering vendors for the year, but we appreciate his reaching out. And Jennifer? Yes? Don't tell him who you spoke with, just deliver the message professionally. Of course, Mrs. Hale. After she hung up, Clara stood on her terrace for a long time, thinking about pride and consequences, about justice and mercy, about the difference between punishment and accountability. She'd taken everything from Adrien that he'd claimed falsely, his title, his wealth, his reputation. But she'd also given him something he'd never had before, the opportunity to prove himself on his own merit. What he did with that opportunity was his choice. Clara didn't need to watch him struggle. She didn't need revenge anymore. She had something better, a life built on truth, a company run with integrity, and the freedom to be exactly who she was. That was victory enough. Spring arrived in Charleston with an explosion of color. Clara's garden, which she now tended herself every weekend, bloomed with roses and azaleas and hydrangeas. She'd hired a landscape designer to help create something beautiful, but the actual work, the pruning, planting, nurturing, that she did herself. It was therapeutic, this process of growing something with her own hands, of seeing direct results from her effort, of building beauty that had nothing to do with profit margins or press releases. One Saturday in April, while Clara was elbow-deep in soil, Elizabeth arrived with mimosas and pastries. I saw you out here from the street and thought you might need sustenance, Elizabeth said, setting up an impromptu brunch on the garden table. How's the empire building business? Exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure, Clara said, washing her hands at the outdoor sink. How's the art gallery? Thriving. I'm actually here to proposition you. Elizabeth poured mimosas into plastic flutes. We're doing a show in June featuring women artists who've rebuilt their careers after major life changes. Divorce, illness, career shifts, that kind of thing. I want you to speak at the opening. I'm not an artist. No, but you rebuilt your entire life after a very public divorce. These women need to hear that it's possible, that you can start over and create something better than what you lost. Clara sipped her mimosa, considering. What would I even say? The truth, that it's terrifying and worth it, that you don't have to accept being diminished, that rebuilding is hard work, but possible work. Elizabeth leaned forward. Clara, you've become this symbol whether you wanted to or not. The woman who took her power back. Use it. Help other women do the same. When is it? June 15th, 7 p.m. You'd speak for maybe 10 minutes, then we'd do a Q&A. Very informal, very supportive environment. Clara thought about the women who'd reached out to her over the past months. Emails from wives in similar situations asking for advice. Messages from young professionals navigating male-dominated industries. Thank you notes from people she'd never met, saying her story gave them courage. She'd ignored most of them, uncomfortable with being seen as inspirational. But maybe Elizabeth was right. Maybe there was value in using visibility for more than just business. I'll do it, Clara said. But I'm not giving them platitudes. I'm telling them the real story. The messy, complicated, sometimes unflattering truth. That's exactly what they need to hear. The weeks leading up to the gallery event, Clara found herself thinking more about the personal dimension of what she'd done. The business side was documented, the contracts, the corporate restructuring, the policy changes. But the emotional journey, the internal transformation from invisible wife to visible leader, that was harder to articulate. She spent evenings writing and rewriting her speech, trying to capture the complexity of choosing yourself after years of choosing someone else. Trying to explain that freedom came with grief, that power came with responsibility, that visibility came with vulnerability. The night of the gallery opening, Clara stood backstage listening to Elizabeth introduce her. The gallery was packed. At least 200 women, some in expensive suits, some in casual clothes, all looking like they needed to hear that change was possible. Our keynote speaker tonight, Elizabeth said, is someone many of you know from headlines, but I've known her for 20 years, and I can tell you that the woman who reclaimed her empire 6 months ago is the same woman who's always been brilliant, strategic, and kind. She just finally let the rest of the world see it. Please welcome Clara Hale. Clara walked onto the small stage to applause. She looked out at the audience and saw her mother in the front row, tears already in her eyes. Saw Marcus and Patricia and Robert, her team who'd supported her transformation. Saw women she didn't know, women who'd come to hear that they could survive their own revolutions. Thank you all for being here, Clara began. 6 months ago, my husband kissed his mistress at a company gala. The cameras turned to me expecting tears. Instead, I smiled, and that smile changed my life. She paused, letting the moment settle. But here's what those cameras didn't show. They didn't show the 12 years before that moment, when I made myself smaller so my husband could feel bigger. They didn't show the times I bit my tongue in meetings while he took credit for my ideas. They didn't show the nights I cried in the bathroom because I felt invisible in my own life. The audience was completely silent. I stayed invisible because I thought it was strategic, because I thought being the power behind the throne was enough. But I was lying to myself. I was hiding because I was afraid of judgment, afraid of failure, afraid of taking up space in a world that tells women we're most valuable when we're supportive, not powerful. Clara looked at her mother, who nodded encouragement. That night at the gala, when my husband made a spectacle of his affair, he gave me a gift. Not intentionally. He was just being selfish and arrogant, but he gave me an excuse to stop hiding, to stop performing invisible, to finally step into the light and claim what had always been mine. She walked to the edge of the stage. Some people think what I did was revenge. They think I destroyed my husband's career out of spite. But here's the truth. I enforced a contract. I protected a company. I reclaimed assets that legally belonged to me. If a man had done the exact same thing, they'd call it good business. But because I'm a woman, because I'd been the supportive wife for so long, people expected me to stay small, even after being publicly humiliated. A few women in the audience nodded. I'm here tonight to tell you that you don't have to stay small. You don't have to accept being diminished. You don't have to wait for permission to claim your own power. Clara's voice strengthened. But I'm also here to tell you that choosing yourself is hard. It's terrifying. You will lose people. You will be criticized. You will have moments where you wonder if being invisible was actually easier. She smiled. And then you'll remember that invisible wasn't easier. It was just safer. And safety isn't the same as living. Truly living means being seen, being judged, being willing to fail publicly. It means stepping into the light, even when the light is harsh. Clara looked around the room. So if you're here tonight because you're trying to rebuild after a divorce, or a career change, or any other major life transformation, I see you. I know it's hard. I know you're scared. But I also know you're stronger than you think, because you're here, because you're still trying, because you haven't given up. She felt tears prick her eyes, but didn't try to hide them. Build your life on truth, not performance. Build your power on substance, not facade. And when people try to keep you small, remember that their discomfort with your growth says more about them than it does about you. The applause started before she finished, building to a standing ovation. Clara stood on the stage, looking out at these women who'd come seeking hope, and felt something shift inside her. This was why visibility mattered, not for ego or recognition, but for connection. For showing other women that the path existed, even if it was difficult. The Q&A afterward lasted almost an hour. Women asked about navigating divorce, about finding courage to leave bad situations, about building careers after years of supporting someone else's. Clara answered honestly, never sugarcoating the difficulty, but always affirming that it was possible. One woman stood, her voice shaking. How did you know it was time? To stop trying to make it work and just leave? Clara thought back to that moment at the gala, watching Adrien kiss Vanessa while cameras flashed. I knew it was time when staying hurt more than leaving would, she said quietly. When I realized I'd rather face uncertainty alone than certainty with someone who made me feel invisible. When I understood that the person I was becoming in that marriage wasn't someone I wanted to be. The woman nodded, tears streaming down her face. After the event, Clara's mother approached and pulled her into a long hug. Your father would be so proud, Catherine whispered, not just of the business success, but of who you've become. So very proud. I miss him, Clara said. I know, sweetheart, but he's here. In every decision you make, in every woman you just inspired. He's here. Driving home that night, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Complete. Not because she'd achieved some external measure of success, but because she'd finally aligned her outer life with her inner truth. She was visible now, powerful, authentic, and it felt like coming home to herself. The months that followed brought continued growth. Hale Developments expanded into 2 more cities, both with mixed-income projects modeled on Harbor Point. Clara's advocacy work led to policy changes at the state level regarding affordable housing incentives. And slowly, quietly, she built a life that felt authentically hers. She dated occasionally, eventually entering a relationship with Daniel Park, a professor of architecture who respected her ambition and never felt threatened by her success. They took it slow, both wary after previous relationships, both committed to building something real. A year after the gala, Clara stood in her office looking out at Charleston's skyline. Every third building bore the Hale Development's name now, the transformation complete. The company had grown, the mission had clarified, and the woman who'd once hidden in the shadows now stood in full light. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Board meeting in 10. Ready? Clara smiled. Always ready. As she gathered her materials, she caught her reflection in the window. The same woman who'd stood at that gala a year ago, but different too. More confident, more present, more herself. The invisible queen had claimed her throne not through performance or facade, but through truth and courage and the willingness to be seen. And the empire she'd built, not on credit stolen or glory claimed falsely, but on substance and strategy and vision, would last far longer than any monument to ego ever could. Clara walked toward the boardroom, toward the meeting, toward the future she'd built with her own hands. She'd reclaimed more than a company. She'd reclaimed herself. And that was the greatest empire of all.